is a breakthrough on the horizon and one of the country's most high-profile unsolved mysteries.
JonBenet Ramsey, the name we all know, the case that shook America that Christmas nearly 30 years ago. Could there finally be a major turn in the case? 2020 begins right now.
I just kept saying, no. Ask God to raise her.
JonBenet Ramsey, the story you can't forget, in case you think you know. JonBenet. With all that attention, all that scrutiny, why hasn't this crime been solved?
One simple reason: the police have refused help that was offered, and it could have helped.
But now is the new documentary series changing the picture.
Go back to the damn drawing board.
So early on, they locked into this crazy idea that the parents were responsible. They get tunnel vision.
With new DNA technology, is a solution closer than ever.
We think the crime can be solved.
Inspiring John Ramsey.
Tonight, the new John Ramsey interview.
You go under wash, and you just can't do that.
And what you've never seen before. From the iconic Barbara Walters sit-down.
This was a monster that killed our daughter.
And the police think that it's you.
Now the detective who defied the police.
They knew at the time that there was DNA and that it was not from Ramsey DNA.
And he just said, I have a name. I want you to write it down. And I did. And he said, that's where you start. All but one person on that list is innocent.
Then you got your killer.
She was a beautiful child of God. We knew she was special. We knew she was going to make a difference. We certainly didn't expect it to be this way. And yet, a child who was known literally around the world. So she did become special.
She is the special little girl, forever 6 years old. While JonBenet Ramsey remains frozen in time, her father has endured nearly 3 decades without justice, without answers, and without his daughter. I sat down for a new interview with the now 81-year-old John Ramsey.
Hello, sir. Byron Fitz.
John Ramsey. I had JonBenet bless my life for 6 years, and she really was a blessing. Just an amazing little kid.
She was daddy's girl.
She was daddy's girl, big time.
Do you allow yourself to think, what if this hadn't happened?
I don't. I did run into one of her little friends on the street who was now, 30 and an adult. And that was a little bit of a jolt. Think, wow, could have been JonBenet. She's still my little girl. That's the picture I have in my head when I think of her.
Ramsey has renewed hope that his daughter's killer can finally be found, confident that advances in DNA technology are the key to solving the mystery.
There's been a number of old cold cases solved using this genealogy research.
There was no more important story in the country than the disappearance and the death of your daughter.
Police have still not named a suspect.
It has now been 12 days since JonBenet Ramsey was murdered.
Officers have spent more than 3,000 hours processing evidence and interviewing more than 90 people.
With all that attention, all that scrutiny, why hasn't this crime been solved?
One simple reason: the police have refused help that was offered. They had no experience. They didn't have a homicide department.
That police response and its aftermath is the focus of a new Netflix docuseries, Cold Case: Who Killed JonBenet Ramsey?
Someone killed this 6-year-old child.
You have a small-town police force that gets a crime that they're not used to.
Is it fair to question the Boulder Police Department's experience, ability to investigate homicide?
I don't think so. Just because you have one homicide in a year, I think is actually a sign of remarkable strength in a community.
This was the first murder in Boulder that year, and it was December 26th. So they don't have a lot of murders, particularly where a little girl is tortured to death.
John Ramsey worked with award-winning documentarian Joe Berlinger, who says he wanted to shed new light on what he calls one of the most brutalized families in American history.
Obviously, he wasn't legally wrongfully convicted, but he was wrongfully convicted, and his wife, Patsy, the family, were wrongfully convicted in the court of public opinion.
You still feel like it's a cloud over your family name?
Yeah.
Because I guess there are still people in the country
who
who still believe
absolutely
that your wife was
no
responsible.
doubt. And we could have the killer confessed, arrested, in prison, and there'd still be 5 to 10% of the population that yeah, it was the father, or yeah, it was the mother.
The hit docuseries has sparked a new generation of interest on social media.
Okay, one of my girlfriends and I have a new JonBenet theory, and I want to float it. I just finished complex, and holy I need to know what happened to JonBenet Ramsey.
With the wave of renewed scrutiny, the Boulder Police Department issued a video statement last month.
So much of how law enforcement works has changed in the last 30 years. There are a number of things that people have pointed to throughout the years that could have been done better, and we acknowledge that is true. However, it is important to emphasize that while we cannot go back to that horrible day in 1996, our goal is to find JonBenet Ramsey's killer.
That horrible day in 1996 began at Christmas time in the storybook neighborhood where the Ramsey family lived, in Boulder, Colorado.
There's a saying here in Colorado that Boulder is 30 square miles of fantasy surrounded by reality.
It's very wealthy, it's well-to-do.
John and Patsy Ramsey lived in a 6,700 square feet Tudor there on 15th Street.
John Ramsey was the CEO of a computer services company. He'd suffered tragedy before when his 22-year-old daughter Beth died in a car accident. In 1980, he married his new wife, Patsy.
By all accounts, they were a happy couple. Patsy was a high society woman.
I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a friend. I'm a wife and a mother. John used to tell people that I invested in futures, the future of my children. That's how I usually answer my occupation.
John and Patsy Ramsey had 2 children together. Their firstborn was Burke, 9 years old, and JonBenet, 6.5, in kindergarten.
My name is John Andrew Ramsey, JonBenet's half-brother. JonBenet was just an energetic and fun kid.
Patsy Ramsey was a former beauty queen, Miss West Virginia. By the time JonBenet was 4 years old, she was in the pageant system herself.
I really believe that if we hadn't seen the beauty pageant photos of JonBenet Ramsey, it might have just gone into the ether as another child murder. This one captivated us because we saw the beauty pageant pictures.
Hello, I'm Patsy Ramsey. This is JonBenet. She's 4, Burke is 7.
Christmas was Patsy's favorite time, and she really went all out. She had a Christmas tree for every room, and every tree had a theme. The windows were done with garland, the staircases had garland, there were red ribbons everywhere.
And from all of us at our house to everyone at your house, Merry Christmas and the happiest of New Years.
There was plenty to celebrate that Christmas of 1996. Patsy had been battling ovarian cancer and was finally in remission. On Christmas morning, the family opened presents in their home.
They were going to a friend's house for dinner that night.
We were going to leave early the next morning for a trip to our summer cottage in Michigan. So we came home, set the alarm, and went to sleep.
This is your first extended interview.
In 2000, Barbara Walters spoke to the couple about that terrible day.
You get up, you're dressed. What happens?
I went down our steps from our bedroom to the second floor. Then I started walking down the spiral staircase. And as I came to the bottom of the stairs, there were 3 pages neatly laid across one of the runs of the stairway.
She picked up the note and she started to read it.
I just remember when I read, "We have your daughter," it just, this overwhelming fear.
And then
I just screamed for John. Screamed.
Take me back to that day.
I was shaving, we were getting dressed, and I heard Patsy scream, and we called the police immediately.
We were kidnapped. Hurry, please explain to me what's going on. What's your name? Are you Patsy Ramsey? I'm the mother. Oh my God!
I was the call taker that night shift when the call came in.
Police, what's going on 15th Street? What's going on there, ma'am? We were kidnapped. Hurry, please explain to me what's going on, okay? There's a note left in our daughter's phone. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
Oh my God! Please.
She's hysterical. She says there's a kidnapping.
Please. Okay, I'm sending an officer over, okay? How long she's been gone? No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here?
if you do anything, if police come, if FBI come, your daughter will die. You called 911.
So I had to do something. I had to take action.
And I mean, all this happened in a matter of moments.
Patsy Ramsey called 911 at 5:52 a.m., and the first officer from the Boulder Police Department arrives 3 minutes later at 5:55.
We called friends for help. At that point, your daughter is gone.
Desperate.
She's in the hands of a madman.
My phone rang. Pam, they've got her. What do you mean they've got her? They've kidnapped John Benet. She's gone.
What was the atmosphere like as you sat and waited?
Well, it was awful. First of all, we didn't know whether the kidnapper was going to call that day, because the note said, "I will call you tomorrow. Get plenty of rest." I was deathly afraid that tomorrow was in fact the 27th.
You lose all perception of time, of place. You've just been dealt a horrible, crushing blow.
At 6 o'clock on the morning of December 26th, the police came in and did a cursory search of the residence. It was a lavish home with about 18 rooms.
The police did a terrible, terrible job securing that scene. If you don't secure the scene, you don't get good evidence.
The mistakes they made were outrageous. They were mystifying. They were mistake after mistake after mistake.
People were streaming through that house. They were in the kitchen. They were in the living room. There were some friends of Patsy's that were helping her wipe up the kitchen. There could have been fingerprints there.
You had friends that were Windexing the sink and washing dishes. And
people were making toast in the kitchen. And yes, a kidnapping is a crime scene, but we were so focused on getting John Benet back. That was the task.
What we have learned is that everyone should have been sequestered into an area so that people weren't roaming around the house.
And that was a mistake on my part. The reason I didn't is because these people were the Ramsey's support system. There was no information at all to indicate the family was involved at that point.
It was a crime scene, and it was getting contaminated. The note was being passed around and reviewed by all of their friends.
Of all of the evidence left behind, that ransom note is the most baffling. Number one, it is too damn long. A ransom note is not that long. A ransom note says, "I have your child, I want $1 million, I'll call you later."
The note was 3 pages and written in longhand.
That ransom note was the War and Peace of ransom notes.
It begins, "Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully.
You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills."
You think about this number and how is it relevant? And it's relevant because John Ramsey got a bonus from his company for $118,000. How many people knew that? I'm going to guess not a lot of people. This footage of Barbara Walters' interview with the Ramseys in 2000 has never aired until now.
the ransom note asked for an odd figure, $118,000. That was a bonus that you had received.
Well, that was one of the theories that I came up with, that it was close to the net amount I'd received that year as a bonus. 118 means something to the killer. We know that. We believe that. Whether it's tied to my bonus or something the killer knows, we don't know.
Did you know that your husband got this kind of a bonus?
Not at the time, no.
Lou Smith, a detective who would later be brought into the case to re-examine the evidence, noticed something else unusual about the ransom note. Some of the phrases appear to mimic lines in movies about kidnappings. Lou Smith recorded his observations about the case.
John? The movie Ransom was playing in Boulder.
I have your son. Oh, Jesus.
I want $2 million.
Oh, God.
In that particular movie, a Batcat industrialist, his son was kidnapped. There's a lot of the same verbiage in this note as was in even a note that was written in that particular movie.
If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies.
A kidnapper says a similar line to Clint Eastwood in the movie Dirty Harry.
If you talk to anyone, I don't care if it's a Pekingese pissing against a lamppost, the girl dies.
You and your family are under constant scrutiny, as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. That's a line used by a terrorist in the movie Speed.
Do not attempt to grow a brain.
Our guy's a real watcher of that particular type of movies.
The ransom note was a vital piece of evidence. Police need to figure out who wrote it and when.
On the morning of December 26th, the minutes ticked by as the Ramseys waited to hear from the kidnapper.
It was awful. The kidnappers had written that they would telephone you by 10 a.m.
All I prayed for was he would call.
But it would be a discovery inside the house that would change everything. The ransom note that Patsy Ramsey says she found indicated there would be a call between 8 and 10 a.m.
The police prepped me on how to respond in a phone call, and it's very important to hear John Benet's voice.
Police officers were leaving between 9:30 and 9:45 before that time period of the phone call had even expired. One lone detective was left on the scene.
Detective Linda Arndt is left behind in the house with John and Patsy Ramsey.
Arndt didn't have extensive homicide experience managing a kidnapping and what was about to unfold. This was likely pretty overwhelming for one lone police officer.
I was praying. Linda Arndt had said to me, we're hopeful that the kidnappers will just drop Jean Benet off someplace. And I kept looking out the window, clutching this cross, and just imagining that she was going to come running down the street.
They're waiting for a telephone call from the kidnapper. What's going to happen next?
My former ABC News colleague, Elizabeth Vargas, did one of the first extensive interviews with Detective Linda Arndt.
10 o'clock comes and goes, and there's no acknowledgement that the deadline imposed by the author of the ransom note is come and gone.
Nobody said it's 10 o'clock and the kidnappers haven't called?
Nobody said that.
According to Arndt, neither John nor Patsy Ramsey seemed to mark it or freak out about it. She says later she found it curious that John Ramsey checked his mail in the kitchen in the middle of the crisis.
How are you supposed to act when you think?
Oh, I don't know for sure, but I really thought I could get John Benet back if I kept my wits about me. You know, there was a pile of envelopes that had come through our front door slot. I was looking for another communication for the kidnapper. She should have been doing that.
Linda Arndt tells the restless John, why don't you look around the house, see if anything is missing or looks strange.
Check the house, top to bottom. Look for anything that might belong to Jean Benet that is in place where it shouldn't be.
Were you at that point giving him perhaps a little bit of distraction, busy work?
I wanted to lessen his anxiety by giving him a job to do, a task, a meaningless task.
John took a friend with him. They went to the basement, and John opened the door.
You opened the door to the small room.
I knew instantly what I'd found. I'd found my daughter. She was lying on a white blanket. The blanket was wrapped around her. Her hands were tied above her head. She had tape over her mouth. I immediately knelt down over her, felt her cheek, took the tape off immediately off her mouth. I tried to untie the cord that was around her arms. I couldn't get the knot untied. Picked her up, and I ran upstairs and laid her on the floor and still had a hope that she was alive.
And I see John Ramsey carrying Jean Benet up the last 3 steps from the basement. She looked like she was sleeping. She had some marks on her face and on her neck. I knelt next to her and I leaned down to her face. And John leaned down opposite. And he asked if she was dead. And I said, yes, she's dead. And as we looked at each other, I remember, and I wore a shoulder holster, tucking my gun right next to me and consciously counting I've got 18 bullets.
Why did you do that?
Because I didn't know if we'd all be alive when people showed up.
She clearly felt in danger at that moment. She made it clear that she thought John Ramsey killed his daughter and that he might kill her.
Linda Arndt's ability to look in someone's eyes and determine they were a killer is a remarkable talent.
We reached out to Detective Arndt to ask her about her reaction back then, but she did not respond. Ramsey has long been upset with her.
She said, yeah, I saw it in John's eyes. I knew he was guilty. That was the detective that was there that morning.
How is it that you have all these cops searching a home and nobody finds the body, but you ask John Ramsey to go look for things out of the ordinary, and he finds his daughter in a room that had never been opened by anybody in law enforcement? That's crazy.
He lays her on the living room floor where just a few minutes before, friends and neighbors have been walking and, bringing in fibers and whatever to contaminate the scene. And then the coup de grace. He grabs a blanket, which is full of who knows what kind of contaminants, and throws it over the body.
Patsy was being kept out of the room, and I didn't want Patsy to see JonBenet laying there like that.
I remember walking in and seeing her lying there in front of the Christmas tree. I knelt down over her and just laid my body on her body and my cheek against her cheek, and it was cold. And Father Rawl was there, and he started saying the last rites, I believe, and I just kept saying, no, ask God. Ask God to raise her.
So the kidnapping of JonBenet Ramsey has turned into the murder of JonBenet.
JonBenet Ramsey was violated and murdered in a horrific way. Many injuries to this little girl's body. The x-ray of her skull shows a massive fracture.
This is an 8-inch skull fracture, so we're talking a major force. This is just a massive blow.
But the ultimate cause of her death was strangulation with something called a garrote.
It's a device of string, and it's wrapped around what ends up being a piece of a paintbrush. And what happens is, as JonBenet is losing consciousness, she's leaning forward. And so this gets tighter and tighter, and you can see how it cuts into my hand. You can see exactly what hit into her neck. And that ultimately, according to the ME, is what killed her.
If you look at the autopsy report, JonBenet died while being tortured. She was alive while she was being tortured.
There were signs that JonBenet had also been sexually abused. The broken pieces of paintbrush that were used for the garrote were also used to sexually assault her.
There were 4 people in that house, and 1 died overnight. From the very beginning, they suspected the parents.
Within minutes of JonBenet's body being found, this was who they were going to go after. And that's what they did.
The police are thinking, we gotta talk to those parents, and we gotta talk to them right now before they start getting their story straight together.
When JonBenet's body was brought out past the candy canes decorating the front of the house, there were only a couple of reporters outside to capture that. And then, the media frenzy started.
JonBenet Ramsey, the little girl in Colorado, was murdered.
Beauty queen JonBenet. JonBenet's murder has frightened residents of Boulder.
News outlets from around the world had descended upon Boulder and were just hiding in trees and bushes and digging through our trash, following you around town. I mean, it was war.
The JonBenet Ramsey case was completely out of control.
You also have to remember the O.J. Simpson case had wrapped up. The 24-hour news cycle, their content had dried up. And so along came the Ramsey family, and we fit right into that slot.
JonBenet Ramsey was a precocious 6. She had been strangled to death in the basement of her own home.
You have the shock, this incredibly horrendous crime. And then you have these videos that surface of this beautiful young girl.
JonBenet Ramsey! Our volunteer freedom.
Dancing in her costumes, and those were the first viral videos.
She'd like to become an Olympic ice skater.
People who didn't really grow up in the South and understand that industry, the industry of beauty pageants, thought it was the most horrible exploitation of a child they'd ever seen. So when Images started playing across the television, people started thinking, what's wrong with that family?
For many, this was their first glimpse into the world of child pageants. Long before shows like Toddlers and Tiaras.
Number 65, Alana.
But John Ramsey tells me it was something that would bring joy to Jean-Benet and his wife, Patsy.
The pageant photos came out, and that made it more juicy.
Yeah.
And that was just something that Patsy and Jean-Benet had fun with.
But I never participated in what I would call a beauty contest. She participated in a talent show.
She would sing and dance?
She would sing, she would dance.
I wanna be a cowboy sweetheart. I wanna learn to go fancy ride.
These were such a small, minuscule part of what Jean-Benet was all about. I think it's just because the photographs were so available and so beautiful that it took on a life of its own.
It's part of what turned it into an international circus.
This little girl's image was everywhere overnight.
The biggest negative factor about John and Patsy Ramsey was that they had allowed their daughter to be in child beauty pageant contests, and people did not like them.
But to think they would murder their own daughter was unimaginable, yet police found evidence that, in their minds, pointed towards the Ramseys.
We start with children of this age, when they die, tend to die at the hands of their parents. So the focus is naturally going to be on the parents to begin with. Now, in the house, the ransom note is written on a pad that belongs to Patsy. This is the notepad. This location right here is where the note was physically found by Patsy. The pen that was used was in the house.
The garrote that was used in Jean-Benet's murder also got the attention of investigators because of what it was made of.
It basically is an artist's paintbrush that's broken, and what's important is that it actually came from Patsy's art supply.
And there were even fibers on the backside of the duct tape that had been on Jean-Benet's mouth from Patsy's clothing.
And that was important, but Patsy lived in the house, so those could have been there anyway.
The police started thinking, well, maybe this is just a cover-up, that the Ramseys harmed their child some way, then panicked and tried to create basically a kidnapping scenario.
Patsy and John should have been taken to the police station immediately for separate interviews, for examination of their body for defensive wounds, for collection of their clothing. That never happened.
At this point, they haven't interviewed the mother or father. Not surprisingly, they're still very grief-stricken. They've not been in any kind of condition to be interviewed.
My father, myself, we all marched into that police station. We gave blood, we gave hair, we gave fingerprints. The thing that really stuck with me, two detectives hand me their business cards, and one says narcotics officer, and the other says auto theft. And I buried my head to my hands, because I knew at that point we were in a bad spot.
Though the police had spoken to John Ramsey after Jean-Benet's body was found, what they really wanted to do was formally interrogate the couple.
The police are thinking, we got to talk to those parents, and we got to talk to them right now before they start getting their story straight together.
Your lawyers advised you then not to submit to police questions. Why not? People say, wouldn't you have wanted to tell them everything?
Well, I don't recall that our lawyers told us that at the time. We said, yeah, we want to keep working with you, but can't you come here? We can't go out. Patsy was in bed. Patsy was barely able to move. We were perfectly willing and anxious to work with the police to find the killer. We had a higher priority at that point, and that was to bury our daughter.
The family is flying the body back to Atlanta for burial.
On New Year's Eve, Jean-Benet was laid to rest just outside Atlanta, Georgia.
This service is in loving memory of Jean-Benet Patricia Ramsey.
We flew back to Atlanta to bury Jean-Benet. Atlanta being our home. Atlanta being where my oldest sister Beth is buried.
We give thanks today for Jean-Benet, for the love that she had for her parents.
I want to go back to the funeral.
Whatever we do, we're gonna go through it together. We may not get far, but sure as the star, wherever we are, it's together.
Wherever we are, it's together.
We sang that. She and I sang that together. We'd sing it driving in the car, and we just knew that we would always be together in everything. I wanted my children to know that I was with them through things. regardless of what happened in life. Unconditional love.
Oh, look at that! You can go places now.
Everybody wanted to see these parents. Everybody wanted to talk to these parents, especially the police.
When you realized that you two were the prime suspects, what did you think?
The Boulder police did not interrogate the Ramseys, but they remained the main suspects. Many people found the Ramseys' behavior peculiar and suspicious, and from that, many presumed they must be guilty.
When you realized that you two were the prime suspects, what did you think? What did you feel? What did you say?
Well, we were outraged. We were shocked. How could they think that? We were a normal family.
I just didn't believe it. You just can't believe it. I mean, you were suffering from having lost their child. And then for someone to accuse you, it's just, you can't believe that would happen.
Then 6 days after the murder, they go on CNN and say they didn't do it.
If anyone knows anything, please help us.
We've sensed from our friends that this tragedy has touched not just ourselves and our friends, but many people.
As a mother, my heart went out to this couple.
If I were a resident of Boulder, I will tell my friends to keep your babies close to you. There's someone out there.
Some people thought it was odd they were talking to the public rather than to the police.
You did an interview on CNN. Why did you do that?
We did it reluctantly and at the insistence of some friends who could see that we were being painted as guilty.
Unfortunately, at that time, we were so, when we look back at it, we were so distraught and medicated. It was probably not giving the impression that he had hoped we would achieve.
Police end their 10-day search of the Ramsey house and remove the crime scene tape. It is unknown if the family intends to resume residency at the home. We have no comment on the whereabouts of the family at this time.
Starting from the beginning of this case, we, the media, lapped up what the Boulder Police Department wanted to tell us about what they were doing in the JonBenet Ramsey case.
For the most part, the police didn't say much. They didn't leak a lot of information. But when they did, it was major. They thought the mother did it.
Some people who believe Patsy killed her daughter believe it was over bedwetting and then staged it to look like an intruder. The bedwetting theory was a big theory at the time.
I'm a cancer survivor of stage 4 cancer. When you are standing on the brink of death with a terminal illness, your priorities suddenly line up. Bedwetting is totally insignificant. I love my children. I wouldn't harm them for anything in the world.
But many Americans were riveted by that possibility that the Ramseys might have done this.
Some of the authorities have said that you staged this, that you loosely tied your daughter's hands, that you put the noose, the garrote, to make it look as if some terrible person had done this, that this whole picture was staged.
Well, that's absurd. This was done by a terrible person. The garrote was deeply embedded in JonBenet's throat. Her hands were tightly bound. I couldn't get the knot untied. I tried to get it untied even before I brought her upstairs. And to say that we accidentally murdered our daughter and then staged this is nonsense.
If we staged it, why would we have disturbed it? Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, did either of you have anything to do with the death of your daughter?
No.
Mr. Ramsey, did you kill JonBenet?
No, I did not.
Mrs. Ramsey, did you kill your daughter?
No, I didn't kill my daughter.
How do you feel when I ask you these questions?
Insulted, pain, hurtful. How can I tell you how much I love my daughter? I love her from the depths of my being. It's just unimaginable.
There was a Gallup poll at the time that said something like 70% of the American public thought that you or your wife were guilty.
I remember reading that. Yeah, it's like, well, I
that's what you were told over and over again.
There's so many puzzle pieces here that just don't fit.
Do you really think your daughter's murderer will be found?
Yes, I do. Because the killer has never been pursued. An objective, wide investigation hasn't taken place. The parents have been focused on. That's all that's been done.
I think it's solvable. I really believe it's solvable given today's technology.
There are a lot of people in this country who hope that crime is solved in your lifetime.
The suspect might be out there and be someone who's completely unknown, who has never been on anyone's radar.
What we know is that just within a few mile radius of the Ramseys' home, there was approximately 38 to 40 sex offenders in that area. And the question is, have they all been completely vetted?
And decades later, granddaughters of one of the investigators joined the search for the killer.
There's a lot more evidence to cover and more myths to debunk.
But I do want to get the truth out there. Was it an accident? Was it intentional? Premeditated?
I want to say something to the person or persons that took this baby from us. The list of suspects narrows. Soon there will be no one on the list but you.
John Bonet. How many victims has he had in the past? How many victims is he going to have in the future?
Tonight, the new focus on one of the most haunting unsolved cases of the last 30 years. Will the spotlight push the police for further DNA testing?
I just need some specifics from the police. Are you doing this? Are you doing this?
Now, new interviews.
They targeted you, John. They wanted to hurt you, and they did that by killing your daughter.
What you've never heard before from Patsy Ramsey.
The police were more concerned with feeding the frenzy of media sharks every day than in finding the killer of our daughter.
The detective who left the police to pursue his own investigation.
Lou dedicated a big part of his life to finding JonBenet's murderer.
Detective Lou Smith was like, whoa.
He just said, I have a name. I want you to write it down.
Is the answer in the list he left behind?
Our father was a detective on one of the biggest unsolved murders in our generation.
Do you think if they'd taken help offered 28 years ago, this case would have been solved?
Oh, yeah. I have no doubt.
There's a good opportunity to really find out who did this.
JonBenet was an entertainer. She would entertain at the drop of a hat.
She loved to sing and dance and perform. It was a natural for her.
I competed with JonBenet. She had all these wonderful costumes and outfits, and she had this presence.
Third runner-up, JonBenet.
It wasn't really a competition to her. It was more of like, this is fun. Like, let's go on stage and do that.
My name is JonBenet Ramsey, and I'm 5.5.
What is your favorite animal at the zoo?
The monkeys, because they laugh and stuff and hang around.
Today, JonBenet Ramsey would have been 34 years old.
I was her age. She would be my age now. She would be pursuing her own career. She never got to grow up. She is frozen in time now.
Well, the police were convinced pretty early on that Patsy and or John were involved. You had a district attorney's office that was saying, not so fast. And that created enormous tension between the two.
Did you hear anything yesterday? I think there are some new developments.
Alex Hunter, the district attorney, wanted someone to come in with fresh eyes in this case and look at it from the perspective of a defense attorney. Who might have killed JonBenet as an intruder, not just the parents, but from the outside?
Boulder DA Alex Hunter brought Lou Smith out of retirement to help solve the Ramsey case.
One of the great challenges is to try to do the case right. And, I think we're making efforts to meet that challenge by involving people like Lou Smith.
My name is Lou Smith. I'm a retired homicide detective from the Colorado Springs Police Department. Legendary guy. And he said, I follow the evidence. I have got to follow the evidence. Doesn't matter what my opinion is, what I might think. I follow the evidence. And he did. And that takes a lot of discipline.
Smith had a history of closing cases.
He had
tenacity. He was a bulldog. Once he got something in his mind, once he got the reins in his teeth, he was not letting go.
Lou Smith was my father. He was just known as, the detective that solved cases. When he got to a murder scene, he spent time dictating everything he saw. Where the sun was in the sky, what the weather conditions were like, what the neighboring houses looked like.
The legend of Lou Smith is now the stuff of podcasts with granddaughters Jessa and Lexi, unspooling the crime for a new generation.
He advocated for the victim and stood in their shoes.
So that's why we've chosen The Victim's Shoes as our podcast name. Prior to this case, Lou Smith had investigated over 200 homicide cases that led to arrests and convictions. Lou dedicated a big part of his life to finding JonBenét's murderer. When he started his investigation, he felt like everybody else did that it was probably one of the two parents.
It seemed as though the parents were probably involved in it. I thought this would be a fairly easy case. I thought it would be a slam dunk. And I remember talking to my daughter. I kind of joked with her, saying that, if somebody did get in the house, it must have been Santa Claus coming down the chimney.
It was within a couple of days after my dad started on the investigation, when he had a chance to review pictures, the evidence, that he was already saying, I think that they need to look the other way. He was already noting in his journal that he felt that they needed to look at an intruder.
Lou came up with the intruder theory. You can't think about that theory without associating it with Lou Smith.
The first thing that stood out to him was an open window in the basement. There was a suitcase propped up against it. He didn't buy the Boulder Police Department's conclusion that no one could get in that basement window. He began to say maybe somebody did get into that house.
And I'll show you how easily it can be done.
So what did Lou Smith do? He went and climbed in the window himself, camera rolling to prove that it could be done.
It really wasn't that difficult coming in that window.
But is Smith's own theory compromised by the very crime scene photos he himself has studied?
There are cobwebs in the window, which could support that no one did go through this window. The big question is, could you have gone through this window, this small window, without disturbing this cobweb? I think the answer to that is maybe. But the other important point is, how soon was this picture taken after JonBenet was killed? Because spiders can replicate webs very fast.
Also found in the basement by JonBenet's body, a shoe print, a high-tech brand that did not match any of the shoes in the Ramseys' house.
The investigators believe, and maybe rightly so, that that's the bad guy's footprint.
The counter-argument is that footprint image could have been inadvertently left by police officers at the scene, but a more disturbing image in Lou Smith's investigation comes from two marks left on JonBenet's face and back.
The marks themselves, both on the back and on the face, were the same distance apart. Suddenly a little light went on, and it was just like, wait a minute, it was a stun gun.
Smith looked at other murders where a stun gun was known to have been used. He examined photos of a crime victim who had a known stun gun wound.
And the marks are very similar to the face of JonBenet.
He also looked into an experiment performed using stun guns on pigs. These marks were also the same as the marks found on JonBenet.
When we did the pigs, we get perfect marks, just almost like on the back of JonBenet.
This brings back our grandpa's whole motto that things are usually what they seem. Don't make it complicated.
To make things less complicated, Smith transferred all his knowledge and thoughts about the case to VHS tape, leaving behind a 6-hour video presentation of his intruder theory.
There's no reason at all for the Ramseys to use a stun gun. And the Ramseys don't have a stun gun. If it's not a stun gun, what is it? That's the question I always ask. You tell me what it is.
Lou Smith stood up and said, wait a second. We need to look at this again. It actually is possible. It actually is plausible. And in his mind, it's actually the most likely scenario. But there have been challenges from the beginning of this case. There were published reports that the Boulder Police Department refused to accept assistance from outside law enforcement.
Denver police called and offered 2 experienced homicide detectives to come work at Boulder under their direction full-time. They turned it down.
Do you think if they'd taken the help offered 28 years ago, this case would have been solved by now?
Oh, yeah. I have no doubt. I've been told by experienced homicide detectives over the years that this is not a hard case to solve, but they needed to be on it immediately.
Lou Smith thought that the Ramseys were being targeted unfairly.
Thought there was something drastically wrong. I had seen evidence of an intruder.
One thing the police and the district attorney do agree on, both want the Ramseys to come in for a formal videotaped interrogation. And when that day finally comes, it gets heated.
Go back to the damn drawing board. I didn't do it.
Within a few weeks of John Bonet's murder, police had an important clue. The discovery of foreign DNA found underneath her fingernails and in her underwear.
DNA that does not match the Ramsey family, and it shows a foreign male presence. They sat on that for months.
They knew at the time that there was DNA in her panties. That was mixed foreign DNA, and that it was not from Ramsey's DNA. Not Patsy's, not John's, and not Burke's.
Detective Lou Smith was like, whoa. While you're pouring water all over the intruder theory, you're not revealing that you have unidentified DNA, and it doesn't match anybody in the Ramsey family.
Lou is just incensed that the focus is still being, well, it could be Patsy, maybe we need to get her to confess.
The police had eventually interviewed the couple 4 months after Jean Bonet's death, but now authorities want the Ramseys to come in again for a videotaped interrogation.
There were months and months of negotiations. Things about whether they could be videotaped. What are the questions going to be? Should the Boulder police be a part of it? Because the Ramseys said, we don't trust the police. We don't want them there.
Ultimately, the interrogation took place at a different police department, and the Boulder police had to watch it from another building.
The Ramseys finally sit down with the police for 3 days of videotaped interrogations in June 1998, a year and a half after Jean Bonet's murder.
We were there for as long as they wanted, would have stayed for 2 weeks had they wanted. The myth that we didn't cooperate is nonsense.
When you were interrogated by the police, you were interrogated separately.
Yes.
Today is Wednesday, June the 24th, 1998. Arrested at the Brookville Police Department. Tricia Ramsey.
Tom Haney, who was one of the most respected homicide detectives out of Denver, was chosen to interview Patsy Ramsey.
Patsy Ramsey had a year and a half to prepare. I knew that it was going to be tough to get a spontaneous response.
Do you ever recall purchasing black duct tape like this? It seems like there can't be a house in the world that doesn't have duct tape because it repairs everything.
Well, I never liked it because it's so gooey. Isn't it gooey?
He started out softly and kindly and curious, and then he got pointed with his questions, and that made Patsy angry.
If I told you right now that we have, in the process of being examined, trace evidence that appears to link you to the death of John Bonet, what would you tell me?
Tell go retest.
How is it impossible?
I did not kill my child. I didn't have anything to do with it.
She said it was impossible that we had physical evidence linking her to that crime.
I'm talking about scientific evidence.
I don't give a flying flip how scientific it is. Go back to the damn drawing board. I didn't do it. John Ramsey didn't do it, and we didn't have a clue of anybody who did do it.
I am so taken with her swagger. She just tells them, you think you have some evidence on me? Well, you better look again.
We left that child, okay? We're not involved. Read my lips. Let's find out who is. My life has been hell from that day forward. And I can't stand the thought of thinking somebody's out here walking on the street. God knows we're doing it again to some other child. Quit screwing around asking me about things that are ridiculous and let's find the person that did this.
Patsy was feisty. She was combative, in stark contrast to John Ramsey, who was interrogated by Lou Smith.
When Lou interviewed someone, he pried anything out of people just by being understanding and really listening.
Now, John, and I know this is touching right back on a very delicate spot. Was this tape wrapped around any understanding of it.
The interrogation tapes are intriguing to watch, as there's a lot of raw emotion shown by both John and Patsy Ramsey. But the bottom line is both John and Patsy deny that anyone in their family killed JonBenet, and there was nothing revealed that allowed for charges to be brought against them.
And we want to do everything we can to help solve this case for you.
My dad's conclusions after that interview were just firmed up his belief that the Ramseys had nothing to do with this murder.
I'm not saying parents don't kill their kid. Parents do kill their children. So, but they're trying to say, Patsy, that their actions before, during, and after are all consistent with innocent. You didn't do it.
My dad started getting frustrated as time went on because he felt that the case against the Ramseys was being slanted where no other evidence was coming in.
I thought there was something drastically wrong, and that there was a gross injustice in this case. I had seen evidence of an intruder in the house that night.
Lou Smith thought that the Ramseys were being targeted unfairly, and he didn't believe the police were listening to him.
Smith so strongly disagrees with the prosecutor's focus on the Ramseys that he is resigning from the case, saying, "The case tells me John and Patsy Ramsey did not kill their daughter."
He wrote a letter to Alex Hunter telling them that he couldn't be a part of the persecution of these people, is how he termed it.
He wrote, "I intend to stand with this family and somehow help them through this and find the killer of their daughter."
My dad may have resigned from the district attorney's office, but he never stopped work on the case. He walked in JonBenet's shoes, and he owed it to her, he felt, to continue his investigation.
One thing Lou Smith fought to do was tell a grand jury his side of the story, the intruder theory. There were too many unanswered questions. In particular, that male DNA in JonBenet's underwear that didn't match anyone that they knew of. Who could it be?
Grand jurors arrived at the Boulder County Justice Center this morning and were escorted into the courthouse by sheriff's deputies.
There was enormous pressure on District Attorney Alex Hunter to call for a grand jury, and it took him almost 2 years to actually call one. I think it was the media pressure and pressure from the police that forced him to make that call.
A lot of work went into it.
You have to remember, this case was happening just after other high-profile murder cases in the country.
What did you think of your parents at that point by October 31st?
I thought they were these great people that I had killed.
From the Menendez brothers to O.J. Simpson. O.J. did it! Those high-profile cases were on most of the country's mind.
Good morning, Counsel.
Most people think the evidence of Simpson's guilt was insurmountable.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
And yet, he walked. Alex remembered that. He told me one time, "I don't want to spend 2 years of my life and $5 million of the taxpayers' money and lose in court."
Alex Hunter sat a grand jury for 13 months.
Are you surprised by anything you've seen?
No.
Over 13 months, those people heard over 100 witnesses.
My name is Jonathan Webb. I was a grand juror on the JonBenet Ramsey case. It bothers me that the murder of a little girl like this has gone on unsolved for essentially a quarter century.
Members of the grand jury looking like detectives themselves as they finally toured the Ramsey house.
From a crime scene perspective, it was very disturbing how she was found. She's on a concrete floor, a garrote around her neck, and she's 6 years old. That's pretty horrible.
Webb told us that the grand jury spent most of their time focused on two main issues. First, who wrote that ransom note?
We heard from 3 handwriting experts, and even though the handwriting experts couldn't definitively say that she wrote it, they all 3 came to the same conclusion that it could have been Patsy Ramsey.
The Ramsey's defense team had their own experts who said that the comparison between the writing on the ransom note and Patsy's handwriting was not conclusive.
And the grand jury believed that she wrote it.
The second focus for the grand jury, according to Jonathan Webb, was the viability of the intruder theory.
Smith actually presented his intruder theory to the grand jury.
This is the very first photo taken of the training room basement. The window is wide open. Now, if I was a detective, I'd have said, "Wow, this is entry."
But the grand jury wasn't buying the intruder theory because of those cobwebs in the window.
The intruder theory didn't make sense to the grand jury.
the Boulder police had photographed cobwebs. So for someone to get through a small opening like that and not disturbing a cobweb would be remarkable.
A grand jury doesn't decide guilt or innocence the way a regular jury does. The grand jury is only there to decide whether or not there's probable cause to charge the suspects with a crime.
We were troubled by to what level of confidence do we need to have to vote to indict? And it's the preponderance of the evidence, which means greater than 50%. And soon after that, we voted to indict.
The grand jury was looking at two specific accusations for the Ramseys: child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime. The grand jury couldn't point the finger at Patsy or John specifically, but they were sure that one of them committed the crime and the other person helped to carry it out.
This is 7 News at 5.
There is high anticipation in Boulder right now for a Ramsey decision, and we are about to hear an announcement from Boulder DA Alex Hunter.
I and my prosecution task force believe we do not have sufficient evidence to warrant the filing of charges against anyone who has been investigated at this time.
I was shocked. It's extremely unusual for a grand jury to vote to charge and the DA not charge.
I think deciding not to prosecute the parents for homicide was the right decision. No matter what you believe about the case, it would have been very difficult to get a conviction.
Thank you very much.
There were too many questions, in particular, that DNA in the underwear that appears to have been from a man didn't match anyone they knew of.
That's why Lou Smith continued investigating even after he resigned from the case.
He had condensed everything he knew about every person of interest into a spreadsheet.
It's like a PowerPoint on steroids. It detailed 887 names.
But I think what turned this whole case has always been DNA. The killer left behind, I believe, part of his DNA.
On their podcast, Lou Smith's granddaughter spoke about his focus on the DNA in the case.
Over nearly 13 years, Lou took all of the information that he had on this case and developed a database. In this particular murder, he thought that DNA would solve this case.
And thanks to major advances in DNA, a number of big surprises were about to come to the case.
What became groundbreaking at the time was a thing called touch DNA. Essentially, when someone touches something, the skin cells they leave behind can be tested.
In 2008, the then district attorney for Boulder, Mary Lacey, decided to do a new round of DNA testing on JonBenet's pajama leggings.
Remember, there was already DNA from an unknown male found under JonBenet's fingernails and in her underwear. But analysis of touch DNA on her leggings uncovered something new. DNA from at least one unknown male, maybe two.
In recent months, investigators used that new procedure, which helped them discover fresh DNA on JonBenet's long johns, left by the killer's fingertips.
Now, new DNA analysis proves just that. The Boulder District Attorney clears all members of the Ramsey family in the murder of their 6-year-old daughter, JonBenet.
That's a pretty big development. You've got DNA now in 3 places that doesn't match anybody in the Ramsey family. That's a pretty clear indication that somebody else was there, and nobody knows whose DNA it is.
This revelation of this new, unmatched DNA drove the district attorney to announce they're no longer looking at the family.
The news broke here at the district attorney's office with this incredible letter to JonBenet's father.
DA Mary Lacey wrote John Ramsey, "We do not consider your immediate family, including you, your wife Patsy, and your son Burke, to be under any suspicion in the commission of this crime."
The DA also apologized to the Ramseys. She wrote in part, "To the extent that we may have contributed in any way to the public perception that you might have been involved in this crime, I am deeply sorry." John Ramsey responded to the DA's letter and the stunning development on a local newscast.
We're certainly grateful for an acknowledgement that we are innocent, that this was an intruder, which of course we've always maintained.
But this is a reminder how often that they are human beings and how often they get it wrong, how often their biases take them down the wrong path.
Somebody told me in the police world, they said the most dangerous thing is a police department that's made up their mind now. And that's certainly what happened in our case.
All it takes is one match to the DNA, and you've possibly nailed the killer.
Our killer, John Bonet, how many victims has he had in the past? And how many victims is he going to have in the future? And so this killer could still be murdering even today.
Lou Smith dedicated years to investigating the JonBenet Ramsey murder case. But eventually, he ran out of time.
When he got sick with cancer, he knew that his time was limited. And so during that time, he just talked to others about not letting this case die.
He had people coming every single day, 60 to 70, 80 people a day, coming to see him. And they said their goodbyes. And during that time, he would still talk about the case.
I remember about the last 3 days he had slipped into a coma, and the conversations would become one way, and I don't know if you could hear me or not.
I'm John Ramsey. I had the opportunity to visit Lou a week before he died. Remarkably, during that time together, Lou talked a lot about the case. He hadn't given up. He never gave up.
Lou Smith's legacy lives on, and his tenacity to solve this case was passed on to his daughter, Cindy Mara.
And he just said, I have a name. I want you to write it down. And I did. And he said, that's where you start. We'd be glad to pay that. We don't have that electronic report, so we would need Boulder to send it. After my dad died, a couple of us, our family, and then some of his old homicide partners, we just formed a team.
You want to go down to number 2, because that is an in-state one.
Yeah.
What we all share in common is that commitment to fulfill Lou's dying wish that this case doesn't die with him. And I think it's that devotion, that respect, that love for Lou is what keeps our team moving forward.
According to investigators, there were other possible suspects, including a local Santa in town who had previous interactions with the Ramseys.
There's no way in the world that I could be involved in the death of this little girl. I adored her.
But there's another man who comes forward who claims he's responsible for JonBenet's murder.
I love JonBenet, and she died accidentally.
The mystery surrounding the murder of JonBenet Ramsey haunted Lou Smith until the day he died. But he left behind that detailed list, hoping that one day JonBenet's killer would finally be brought to justice.
He had condensed everything he knew about every person of interest into a spreadsheet.
It was like a PowerPoint on steroids. The spreadsheet detailed 887 names.
He wanted us to take the list that he had and try and keep the case alive.
Out of those 887 entries, by the time he went into hospice, Lou had marked 134 cleared.
Over the years, there have been many leads that seemed promising at one time or another.
That new Netflix documentary, Making News, details how just months after JonBenet's murder, a 12-year-old girl who lived less than 2 miles from the Ramseys was attacked as she slept in her bed.
Sometime in the late hours, Mom hears a noise going on, and there was in fact an intruder in her daughter's bedroom preparing to molest her. That person has never been identified. That girl had attended the same dance studio as JonBenet. Are the two cases connected? I don't know.
Boulder police said that while the two cases had some similarities, they found no definitive connection.
In the search for the killer, investigators chased down countless leads, including a local transient.
Here you have Gary Oliva, who apparently on the night or the next day after JonBenet was killed, called a friend and told him over the phone that he had hurt a child.
All of a sudden I get a phone call, and it's Gary, and he's sobbing into the phone like I've never heard anybody sob in my entire life. I hurt a little girl.
He was a homeless man who hung out at a church just a block and a half from the Ramseys' home. And he confessed that he killed JonBenet Ramsey. They took a look at him, but eventually eliminated him because There's absolutely no connection between he and the Ramseys, and his DNA, they used that to eliminate him.
Investigators also looked into Bill McReynolds, a local Santa Claus who'd worked at the Ramseys' holiday parties.
John Bonet had made a comment that he, Bill McReynolds, was coming to their house to see John Bonet. I think everybody thought that was a little weird. His DNA didn't match, and he's out of the picture.
And then Alex Hunter, the Boulder County District Attorney, speaks directly to the killer.
I want to say something to the person or persons that committed this crime. The list of suspects narrows. Soon there will be no one on the list but you.
A day after the DA rattles the cage, a man named Michael Helgoth attracts the attention of authorities.
Michael Helgoth evidently committed suicide the day after the Boulder District Attorney threatened that, hey, we're going to find you.
The death of this child has broken all of our hearts. We will see that justice is served in this case and that you pay for what you did.
That speech was designed to get the killer nervous.
When Michael was found dead, there was a stun gun at his residence. Also, there was a pair of high-tech boots.
These two clues had previously been linked to John Bonet's murder.
Stun gun, a bit odd for people to have. High-tech boots, fairly common thing for people to have. But the real clincher would be DNA didn't match, and he has no connection to the Ramsey family.
And so investigators also eliminated Helgoth as a person of interest.
Investigators finally felt they had a real break in the case with John Mark Carr. He famously claimed he was with Jean Bonet when she died.
I love Jean Bonet. Died accidentally.
Are you gonna give none?
No. Her death was an accident. Yes.
Problem is, he wasn't in Boulder, Colorado when she died, and his DNA didn't match.
Even though Carr claimed he was in the basement when Jean Bonet died, there was just no physical evidence linking him to her murder. And so Carr was eliminated as a suspect.
Take a look at it.
Decades later, the search still goes on for the little girl's killer.
What our team has been doing is focusing on collecting DNA and testing DNA.
I think it's imperative that we investigate every credible suspect that's been provided.
If we keep at it, hopefully we'll finally whittle it down to one person remaining on that list.
Do you think you know who the killer is?
No, I don't. And this is a very dark, evil person. I don't know anybody like that.
But could advances in DNA technology finally help catch the person who killed John Bonet? The John Bonet Ramsey case is just as mysterious today as it was in 1996, when her devastated parents were left with tiny mementos from their daughter to hold on to.
It makes me sad that there were happy little hands in this club. Now they're gone.
So the memories bring tears to your eyes, but you're also a little more at peace?
I don't know. I don't think I will be at peace until we find out who did this.
For Patsy Ramsey, sadly, her fight to find her daughter's killer ended in 2006, when she passed away.
Patsy died of ovarian cancer.
Yes.
Went through all of that without knowing that she'd been cleared.
That's correct.
She was buried next to John Bonet in Marietta, Georgia. But the search for justice continues.
I think it's even more mysterious now to some degree because who the heck was in that house? How'd they get in? Why'd they target her?
Lou Smith's family, dedicated to keeping the case moving forward, continues to work on whittling down a list they presented to law enforcement in 2020.
And what we presented was a confidential list of our top 20 people of interest and the list of the 8 people of interest that our team had eliminated through DNA analysis.
The technology has just advanced so tremendously. John Bonet's blood was mixed with an unknown male DNA in her underpants, and we need to separate out those two profiles, which can be done now, and use genealogical DNA, which has been a huge tool in solving cold cases recently.
That technique has solved some old, dead cold cases. That's what we're asking the police.
Well, DNA science has progressed significantly since the early years of the JonBenet investigation, and investigators can now work with smaller, mixed, and degraded samples. There are still significant hurdles.
What will be your message to the Boulder Police Department today?
Look, just tell us, are you using one of these very cutting-edge labs to do additional DNA testing? If you are doing additional DNA testing, that's all I need to know.
According to the Boulder PD, investigators are utilizing outside labs and experts in the latest technology.
Our collaboration also includes the Colorado Cold Case Review Team, which is a panel of outside experts brought together in December of 2023 to review this case. Our department has had ongoing conversations with JonBenet's family, the last of which occurred in mid-2024. Our goal is to find JonBenet Ramsey's killer. Our commitment to that has never wavered.
The family has not lost the will to fight and the will to find the killer. If we can find the killer, then the next generation doesn't have to live with that trauma and the unknown and the speculation. If we leverage the evidence, we follow the facts, we will find this killer. My dad certainly suffered a tremendous amount, but I think he's focused on life today and enjoying life with family and grandkids, and he's remarried.
But he says he's still always thinking of JonBenet, trying to focus on the positive of this beautiful little girl who will always be forever young.
She knew she was loved. I mean, we told her that every day. Somebody asked me once, what would you say to JonBenet if you could? I would tell her, I'm sorry, I didn't protect you. You know, I had JonBenet bless my life for 6 years. And she really was a blessing.
The Boulder DA tells 2020 that the office is continuing to work with federal, state, and local agencies to make progress on this tragic case.
And David, Lou Smith's family says they're determined to continue making their way through that list. We're going to stay on this story. That's our program for tonight. I'm Deborah Roberts.
And I'm David Muir from all of us here at 2020 and ABC News. Good night.
That anyone in their family killed JonBenet, and there was nothing revealed that allowed for charges to be brought against them.
Yeah, we want to do everything we can to help solve this case for you.
My dad's conclusions after that interview were just firmed up his belief that the Ramseys had nothing to do with this murder.
I'm not saying parents don't kill their kid. Parents do kill their children. So, what they're trying to say, Patsy, is their actions before, during, and after are all consistent with innocence. They didn't do it.
My dad started getting frustrated as time went on because he felt that the case against the Ramseys was being slanted where no other evidence was coming in.
I thought there was something drastically wrong, and that there was a gross injustice in this case. I had seen...
Let your whole life be this. When the tide rises, the sisters and sing. It's not your heart. You are like a bright red rose, always fragrant and seductive. I see you coming back in my sleep. The knowledge is overflowing, it cannot be quenched. The nostalgia is gentle and very gentle. The nostalgia is gentle and
cases were on most of the country's mind.
Good morning, Counsel.
Most people think the evidence of Simpson's guilt was insurmountable.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
And yet, he walked. Alex remembered that. He told me one time, I don't want to spend 2 years of my life and $5 million of the taxpayers' money and lose in court.
Alex Hunter sat a grand jury for 13 months.
Are you surprised by anything you've seen?
No. Over 13 months, those people heard over 100 witnesses.
My name is Jonathan Webb. I was a grand juror on the John Benet Ramsey case. It bothers me that the murder of a little girl like this has gone on unsolved for essentially a quarter century.
Members of the grand jury looking like detectives themselves as they finally toured the Ramsey house.
From a crime scene perspective, it was very disturbing how she was found. She's on a concrete floor, a garrote around her neck, and she's 6 years old. That's pretty horrible.
Webb told us that the grand jury spent most of their time focused on two main issues. First, who wrote that ransom note?
We heard from 3 handwriting experts, and even though the handwriting experts couldn't definitively say that she wrote it, they all 3 came to the same conclusion that it could have been Patsy Ramsey.
Ramsey's defense team had their own experts who said that the comparison between the writing on the ransom note and Patsy's handwriting was not conclusive.
And the grand jury believed that she wrote it.
The second focus for the grand jury, according to Jonathan Webb, was the viability of the intruder theory.
Smith actually presented his intruder theory to the grand jury.
This is the very first photo taken of the train room basement window. The window is wide open. If I was a detective, I'd have said, wow, this is entry.
But the grand jury wasn't buying the intruder theory because of those cobwebs in the window.
The intruder theory didn't make sense to the grand jury. The Boulder police had photographed cobwebs. So for someone to get through a small opening like that and not disturbing a cobweb would be remarkable.
A grand jury doesn't decide guilt or innocence the way a regular jury does. The grand jury is only there to decide whether or not there's probable cause to charge the suspects with a crime.
We were troubled by to what level of confidence do we need to have to vote to indict? And it's the preponderance of the evidence, which means greater than 50%. And soon after that, we voted to indict.
The grand jury was looking at 2 specific accusations for the Ramseys: child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime. The grand jury couldn't point the finger at Patsy or John specifically, but they were sure that one of them committed the crime and the other person helped to carry it out.
This is 7 News at 1.
There is high anticipation in Boulder right now for a Ramsey decision, and we are about to hear an announcement from Boulder DA Alex Hunter.
I and my prosecution task force believe we do not have sufficient evidence to warrant the filing of charges against anyone who has been investigated at this time.
I was shocked. It's extremely unusual for a grand jury to vote to charge and the DA not charge.
I think deciding not to prosecute the parents for homicide was the right decision. No matter what you believe about the case, it would have been very difficult to get a conviction.
Thank you very much.
There were too many questions. In particular, that DNA in the underwear that appears to have been from a man didn't match anyone they knew of.
That's why Lou Smith continued investigating even after he resigned from the case.
He had condensed everything he knew about every person of interest into a spreadsheet.
It's like a PowerPoint on steroids. It detailed 887 names.
But I think what turned this whole case has always been DNA. The killer left behind, I believe, part of his DNA.
On their podcast, Lou Smith's granddaughter spoke about his focus on the DNA in the case.
Over nearly 13 years, Lou took all of the information that he had on this case and developed a database. In this particular murder, he thought that DNA would solve this case.
thanks to major advances in DNA, a number of big surprises were about to come to the case.
What became groundbreaking at the time was a thing called touch DNA. Essentially, when someone touches something, the skin cells they leave behind can be tested.
In 2008, the then district attorney for Boulder, Mary Lacey, decided to do a new round of DNA testing on JonBenet's pajama leggings.
Remember, there was already DNA from an unknown male found under JonBenet's fingernails and in her underwear. But analysis of touch DNA on her leggings uncovered something new. DNA from at least one unknown male.
Maybe two. In recent months, investigators used that new procedure, which helped them discover fresh DNA on JonBenet's long johns, left by the killer's fingertips.
Now new DNA analysis proves just that. The Boulder District Attorney clears all members of the Ram.
Complete the life from the top. My mom will have to be like the ocean. Let your whole life be nuts. When the tide rises, the sea starts to sink. It's that yearning heart. You are like a bright red rose, always brave and unexpected. I see you coming back in my face, and the stars just overflowing. You cannot be quenched. All of my love will be like the ocean. Let your whole life be immense. When the tide rises, the sea starts to sink. It's the yearning heart. You are like a bright red rose. Always brave and unexpected. I see you coming back in my sleep, and the stars just overflowing, and you cannot feel the flowing, and cannot not be quenched. Cannot be quenched. Cannot be.
This is a reminder how often that they are human beings and how often they get it wrong, how often their biases take them down the wrong path.
Somebody told me in the police world, they said the most dangerous thing is a police department that's made up their mind. And that's really what happened in our case.
All it takes is one match to the DNA, and you've possibly nailed the killer.
Our killer, JonBenet, how many victims has he had in the past? And how many victims is he going to have in the future? And so this killer could still be murdering even today.
Lou Smith dedicated years to investigating the JonBenet Ramsey murder case. But eventually, he ran out of time.
When he got sick with cancer, he knew that his time was limited. And so during that time, he just talked to others about not letting this case die.
He had people coming every single day, 60 to 70, 80 people a day, coming to see him. And they said their goodbyes. And during that time, he would still talk about the case.
I remember about the last 3 days he had slipped into a coma, and the conversations would become one way, and I don't know if you could hear me or not.
I'm John Ramsey. I had the opportunity to visit Lou a week before he died. Remarkably, during that time together, Lou talked a lot about the case. He hadn't given up. He never gave up.
Lou Smith's legacy lives on, and his tenacity to solve this case was passed on to his daughter, Cindy Mara.
And he just said, I have a name. I want you to write it down. And I did. And he said, that's where you start. You know, we'd be glad to pay that. We don't have that electronic report, so we would need Boulder to send it. After my dad died, you know, a couple of us, our family, and then some of his old homicide partners, we just formed a team.
You want to go down to number 2, because that is an in-state one.
Yep.
What we all share in common is that commitment to fulfill Lou's dying wish.
The incident room is the heart of any major police inquiry.
I am going to leave absolutely no stone unturned.
Vicious attack, stabbed multiple times. He doesn't stand a chance.
The place where evidence is gathered.
Yeah, I saw the car, I saw the gun. We had DNA, we had blood at the scene. The evidence was overwhelming.
Suspects identified.
In my view, he was the last person to see Jaden alive.
Coming after them, we're now on a manhunt.
Keep your hands out, alright? I've got a taser, okay?
Murderers interrogated.
I'll be honest with you, I don't give a
he's involved, not only in a disappearance but a murder as well.
And cold-blooded killers brought to justice.
£1,500 to travel from Manchester to shoot somebody dead.
This is Murder Scene, the incident room. Tonight.
Police emergency. Hello, caller, what's your location? What's happening?
A drive-by shooting in broad daylight.
Absolute the car, assault the gun.
And an innocent passerby caught in the crossfire.
And then they came back. Then start shooting.
Gunshots that launched one of the biggest manhunts for years.
My name is Andy Cribbin. I was Detective Superintendent in Lancashire Police and I've been a homicide SIO for 8 years. This is our victim, Aya Hashem. She's a 19-year-old woman and she's shot dead on King Street in Blackburn. She's a completely innocent victim. She'd just gone out to get some shopping for the family and she never came home. This is the most complex investigation I've ever worked on. It's a case I think that will stay with all of us who worked on it. It's just one of those moments where everything conspired against Aya. It could have been any of us who were out walking the street that day.
It's a Category A murder. The incident room has more than 200 detectives and specialist support staff.
We will leave no stone unturned. We will do whatever it takes, whatever we have to do to identify who's been involved in killing Aya. It's vital that we get detectives and police officers out there conducting the enquiries. The longer time goes on, the greater the risk is for evidence to be lost and disposed of.
Police rapid response teams flood the area around Quickshine, a tyre shop and car wash on King Street on the edge of Blackburn town centre. DCI Zoe Russo is Andy's second in command.
Blackburn's not the type of place where this kind of incident happens. Certainly not during broad daylight, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. King Street is a very busy route. There's lots of businesses that adorn either side of the street. It's a thoroughfare to get to the town centre and out.
With very little information at the start, detectives must keep an open mind to motive and why Aya was the one who was shot.
Was this a targeted attack? Was this an attack on somebody else? These are the questions that come into the mind, so it's absolutely crucial that we have to ensure that we get these decisions right and we act fast.
One of the first things police need to do is assign a family liaison officer to find out who the victim was and why she was in the area at the time. They need to break the news to Aya's family.
The policemen, they come and they told us what's up. I start to scream. I fell down on the floor. We didn't believe what's happened. Only it took 5 minutes. 5 minutes and she left us.
But nothing about Aya's background or movements points to anything suspicious. She was a 19-year-old law student. The family had moved here from Lebanon 10 years before in search of safety.
I was at home. It was during Ramadan. I called her from her room. She wake up early. Can you please go to bring me some stuff? And she said, yes, I will go. She sat on the stairs, wearing her shoes. And shut the door and she went to Lidl.
Back in the incident room, SIO Andy Cribbin is exploring what significant insight the initial 999 call can offer.
It happened, basically, I saw the car, saw the gun, they went past us, and then they came back, they shoot. They're holding the gun on me, like, when they came around, I said, what? And they started shooting on me. So she was just walking around. She was going to go somewhere, I think.
So you think that they were shooting at you initially, and then called her instead?
It's unusual. Somebody there ringing up saying, actually, I've just been shot at. I've watched them. They tried to kill me. As an investigator, I'm thinking about, well, actually, how does he know that they're actually aiming for him? Is he still at risk because the gunmen are out there? We've got to look after him. We've got to protect him. He's a key witness. We want to get detectives to speak to him and understand what's gone on. Why does he think he's a target?
Police gather CCTV material from Quickshine Tyres and other businesses on King Street, revealing that Aya's murder was caught on camera. The whole event captured in broad daylight from multiple angles. It shows staff going about their day with no sense of the drama that is about to unfold.
Pasha Khan is one of the first people to react. He jumps over a fence and he's going in there, and he's obviously straight onto the police trying to get help for Aya, and people are there trying to save Aya's life.
It's now clear the witness statement taken by Pasha Khan, the owner of Quickshine Tyres, is reliable. While the gunman and driver are still at loose, police need to keep him protected. The murder of Aya was a targeted drive-by shooting, but she was not the intended victim. And crucially, police can now identify the car used in the shooting. A silver Toyota Avensis.
The real priority for us now is, where is that car? It's really key to get as many officers as we can into the area to flood the streets and identify where is the Avensis now.
A 19-year-old woman has been shot dead in broad daylight on King Street in Blackburn.
A full cordon has taken place and the road is unlikely to be reopened for several hours.
Police are trawling all CCTV records in the area.
19-year-old student Aya Hashim was caught in the crossfire of a drive-by shooting in broad daylight in Blackburn. She was just walking to the shops. The detectives and uniformed police have flooded the street around Quickshine Tyres, quickly searching for any evidence that could help explain why Aya was shot and killed. The whole event has been filmed on multiple CCTV cameras, including the shots being fired. In the incident room, SIO Andy Cribbin is briefing officers on what early CCTV evidence reveals.
There were 2 shots fired. That's the first shot that missed. The circle on the left-hand side, the white circle, that's the glass from the impact of the first round that hit Quickshine. You can also see there Aya on the right side just walking along the pavement there as she steps out into the road. Just as the Avensis is passing Aya on the street, so you can see her there just to the right of the telegraph pole, and this is just literally a split second before Aya is shot. This is the telegraph pole there, and you can see the markings where the round was embedded after Aya had been shot. key now for us to identify who was in the car at the time. So who was the gunman and who was the driver within the vehicle. We know from witnesses and we know from CCTV that there were two people in there, the driver in the front and the gunman was in the back of the Avensis. So it's absolutely critical we identify who they are.
All police officers in the area are drafted in to search for the Toyota Avensis used by the shooter. And it's not long before a police dog handler finds it abandoned nearby.
Control to any ARB Lieutenant Attendant Wellington Road to assist a colleague with a found vehicle at the Toyota Avensis.
Yeah, no one checks on that. Reporting 9-1 and 9-6 should be together.
Received.
This is Wellington Road. It's out of the way, out of the main arterial route into Blackburn. Perfect spot to abandon the Avensis before the getaway car. So clearly they planned this route and to leave the Avensis here in the car park. What we'd normally find in a crime such as this is it would be usually burnt out, but I don't think there's been an opportunity to do that. So that is going to open up a lot of forensic inquiries for us within that vehicle.
The car is seized and examined by forensic teams.
We're looking for DNA, we're looking for fingerprints, we're looking for anything in that vehicle that the offenders may have touched. We're also looking for gunshot residue, because that's the vehicle we believe was used in the shooting.
The forensic teams do better than that. In the back seat, they discover a bullet, discarded by apparently careless killers. This is the car used in the shooting.
So even though this is a small car park, you can see that this is a residential area. And what we will have in residential areas is CCTV. So there are a wealth of opportunities for us to recover evidence that will be really important for our investigation.
Aya's family fled Lebanon because of the threat of violence. They had no idea it would follow them to a town in Lancashire.
From 2011, we were living there in Blackburn. It looked like a safe place, and we come here to the UK because it's safe. Our country is not a safe place to us. We never thought like a shooting and gun will be in the UK. But there is no safety there or anywhere.
King Street is a bustling area with many businesses. And the shooting was witnessed by many people on that busy Sunday afternoon. Next door to Quickshine, the scene of Aya's murder, is another tyre shop, RI Tyres. And detectives make an astonishing discovery. It appears there is a history of bad blood between these neighbouring businesses.
So we're learning more now about the feud that's gone on between these two companies. Quickshine used to be a car wash company that then started selling tyres, which upset RI Tyres. There have been fallouts between the staff there.
On several occasions over a year, reports were made to police about workers shouting at customers using the rival's business, squaring up to each other, and on one occasion, throwing scrap metal at each other's garages.
The local naval policing team had made attempts to try and resolve it. There was talk about trying to put up some sort of barrier, a wall or something in between the two properties, but neither side would allow each other to do it, and there was arguments over who would pay for it, so that wasn't going to work. So it was simmering in the background within it. Nothing to suggest that it would ever escalate to a drive-by shooting trying to kill somebody.
RI Tyres is run by Feroz Suleiman.
We're looking on the intelligence space to see what his background in and what level of criminality he's been involved in. We start to understand that he's got a YouTube channel that he uses. He puts videos out there.
Hi there guys, we're back again with our second vlog.
While background checks on Feroz Suleiman don't point to his involvement in the shooting, yet again, the CCTV taken from his own security cameras allow police to analyse his movements before, during, and after the shooting.
Feroz was at RI Tyres and he was on the forecourt. And when we look at the CCTV and we watch Feroz, you can see he's already looking at the events. When he turns up, he's looking, he's watching it, he's anticipating what's going to happen. And as soon as the shots take place, as say Pasha Khan, he's there, he runs over, he's straight over, he's dialing 999. Other people are dialing 999, they're shocked at what's gone on. Feroz is there, he's watching it, he doesn't ring an ambulance, he's anticipating it. You look and we would say he knows what's going to happen and he's waiting for those shots to be fired.
Understanding the feud and Feroz Suleiman's behaviour at the time of the shooting, Andy makes the decision to arrest him and other associates at RI Tyres.
There's enough there to justify us making an arrest. We've got the account of Pasha, we've got the dispute, it seems like a motive, even though it seems a wild motive, there's a motive there. So we've got grounds to arrest people, but we need to do it quickly. The longer we leave it, the more chance there is of evidence being lost, particularly if one of them may be the gunman. We're looking at firearm residue, we're looking at seizing their clothing. We're also looking to secure their phones. Telephony is key on these early arrests, so who have they been in contact with at the time of the murder, who have they been in contact with before murder, and also since the murder. So we're looking for these key connections. Who else is involved? We know Feroz can't be the gunman because he's there on camera at the time of the actual murder itself.
Feroz Suleiman is taken into custody, and in the incident room, the team begins planning his interrogation.
He was calm, he was compliant, seemed a bit surprised, I think, but didn't cause any issues for the officers arresting him. But one of the key things we want to find out, look, if you're involved, tell us, but if you're not involved, equally tell us. We're there to prove or disprove your involvement. He's been very vague, non-committal and quite cagey, not really answering questions properly. But equally, he's not telling us anything to show he's not involved. Not wanting to go into any great detail, we'll say, I can't remember, I'm not too sure, or I was in work. I think at the moment he's thinking we haven't got that much on him, so thinking actually he doesn't really need to say that much, he doesn't need to work hard with what he's telling us. The clock is ticking, the pressure's on. You've either got to charge them or release them.
Suleiman is put into a cell, and the detectives focus on finding the two men who were in the Avensis when Aya was murdered. And there's been a huge breakthrough. Team trawling through hours and hours of CCTV footage. From doorbells, dash cams, and even buses.
We can track people's movements, we can understand what's happened, who's involved, and their locations. We had CCTV from RI Tyres, but once we recovered the Avensis, that was the start of new CCTV parameters. We can see the Avensis driving past and having taken a shot. The Avensis is driven off back up King Street, heading in the direction away from the town centre and RI Tyres. And it's now making its way back through some of the side streets of Blackburn.
And the footage seized appears to show a planned getaway.
The Avensis now turned right, now making its way onto Wellington Road. And then we see now we're on Wellington Road. There's a figure that's just got out of the Avensis that appears to be from the rear of the Avensis has now got into a waiting vehicle at the top of Wellington Road. It's quite difficult from this footage to make out the vehicle and the registration. What we can see is that there's potentially another person in that vehicle. You now see the second person from the Avensis getting into that vehicle.
That vehicle is a blue Ford Fiesta. It's taking the gunman and the driver of the Avensis away from the scene. It's a new lead for detectives.
The opportunity of following the Blue Fiesta is huge. We need to know where was it before the murder, where was it after the murder. And the reality is, on cases like this, we've no idea.
Police arrest operation is underway in connection with the drive-by shooting on the 17th of May on King Street.
Police are still urging any witnesses to come forward with information.
The family of Aya are planning to take her body back to Lebanon for burial.
Detectives are piecing together the evidence to understand how 19-year-old Aya Hashim was shot and killed on a busy street in Blackburn. They already have Faraz Solomon in custody, charged with murder and attempted murder, but need to prove he is connected to the gunman and driver of the Toyota Avensis used in the drive-by shooting. Now, a new vehicle, a blue Ford Fiesta, is in their sights.
We found CCTV footage from Wellington Road. And what that shows us is that after the murder, the Avensis comes back up, it pulls up on the street, and the gunman gets out of the car, gets out of the Avensis and gets into a blue Fiesta, and he gets into the back of the Fiesta. We then see the Avensis parked up near to the Fiesta, and we can see that the driver of the Avensis gets into the front passenger seat of the Fiesta. So it's a real breakthrough. But where did it go after the murder has taken place?
CCTV is absolutely key for us now to follow that blue Fiesta. We need to understand exactly where that vehicle has now gone, identify the movements from CCTV, from ANPR. That will lead us to the gunman, the driver, and those involved. You have to knock on all the doors to identify that you've got the CCTV, and then when the CCTV identifies the next movement of the vehicle, you then have to move to a next set of parameters and carry out the same kind of work. It is very, very labour intensive, but it's key because that is the way that we are going to identify where the Fiesta has gone, and it's going to take us to the gunman and the driver.
CCTV officers trawl the movements both in the run-up to and after the murder. But it's on the trawl, finding where the Fiesta came from, that detectives uncover critical new evidence.
Every time the Fiesta gets to a junction, we have to move the CCTV parameters onto the next street. And in this case, we've started in Blackburn, and we've now had to make our way over to Bolton.
We've identified the registration number of the Fiesta, and we've also identified who was driving it at the time, which is Judith Chapman and Uthman Satya. They're the owner of the Fiesta, and they were driving it before the murder and after the murder. Judith had reported the Fiesta as stolen to the police, but we know that's rubbish. We can prove that she was actually driving it at the time she said it was stolen.
A CCTV trawl of a residential area of Bolton shows Judith Chapman and Uthman Satya's blue Fiesta pull up on a quiet street before two other individuals get into the car.
This is exactly what we're looking for. This is the footage that shows two men getting into the Fiesta, and we know they are the gunman and the driver who committed the murder. And whilst we don't know who they are, the footage, the images are so good, we know we'll be able to identify them from it. We now need to find out where they are and arrest them.
While teams continue to work to identify the gunman and the driver, Aya's body is flown back to Lebanon for burial.
In our religion, to honor a person's death, we have a saying that we were made out of clay, and we're gonna be returned to that state. I remember how good of a sister she was, and what was taken from us. And the anger inside me just grows bigger and bigger. Just took a beautiful person away from not just us, the world, to be honest. She had so much potential.
She was studying international law, and her dream to be like a lawyer to help others. She studied very hard through the years, especially the last year of her life.
The CCTV is shared with the intelligence units of the police forces across the northwest. It's not long before there's a name for one of the suspects.
We've sent it to Manchester, and it pays dividends because they identify Anthony Ennis as being one of the males getting into the car.
Ennis is a known criminal from Manchester. He already has convictions for handling stolen vehicles, arson, and possession of weapons. The task now is to identify other suspects and find evidence which will prove there was a conspiracy to murder Pasha Khan, which also resulted in the killing of Aya Hashim. They must prove that Faraz Suleiman was somehow involved.
Faraz Suleiman is in custody, he's been interviewed, his house has been searched, and his phone is being reviewed. Who has he been in contact with before and after the murder? Is there a connection between Faraz and the offences? Is there a connection between Faraz and the people within that fiesta?
Telepathy is so important within investigations. We're able to find out contacts within that phone, but also we can carry out what we call subscriber checks to find out who people have been contacting.
Detectives identify subscribers to almost every mobile phone number that has been in contact with Faraz Suleiman.
We've got Faraz Suleiman talking to a number of associates that we've seen on the CCTV, and there's one particular associate who's in contact with a mobile number that we can't attribute at this time.
Detectives use the last 4 digits of a phone number as a reference when they don't have a subscriber. The unknown subscriber is 8343.
We need to understand who that belongs to, where that SIM card was purchased from.
Police contact the company to find out where the SIM card was purchased. It was bought from a supermarket in Stockport.
We've got CCTV footage of a male buying the top-up card for that phone prior to the murder. And then before we know it, we get further information from Greater Manchester Police that tells us that this male is Samir Raja. He's very well known, he's an active criminal and a very violent male.
Raja already has a string of convictions for drugs, theft and violence. The team can now use cell sites to trace 8343 and learn the movements of Raja and the contacts that interacted with that phone.
We've looked at the cell sighting, where it is, where it goes to sleep at night, where it is, who is it contacting, people that are connected to Raja.
And that cell site evidence proves that Raja and Faraz Suleiman are directly connected to each other.
We know they were talking to each other before Aya's murder. We know they were sending messages. We know they were meeting each other before the murder because of the cell sighting. And we know just after the murder, 8343 switches off and is never used again.
Detectives must find the location of Ennis and Raja as soon as possible.
We're coming after them. We're now on a manhunt.
Police are on the hunt for the 2 men they believe are directly responsible for the murder of 19-year-old Aya Hashem.
The gunman and driver involved in Aya Hashem's murder have fled the country.
Police have contacted authorities in Portugal and Spain to try to locate the fugitives.
Extensive CCTV trawls and vehicle tracking have finally identified the gunman and the driver involved in the shooting of 19-year-old Aya Hashem. But there's now a new threat to the whole investigation. They have both been traced leaving the UK.
So we've got our gunman, we've got our driver, but they know we're onto them because they've fled the country. Roger and Ennis are out of our jurisdiction. So how do we get them there? We need to do it quickly because we've got other people in charge. We can't send police officers out there to arrest them, we haven't got the powers. So again, it's trying to identify where are they and how do we get them back.
The challenge that we have now is we need to identify exactly where Zamir Raja and Anthony Ennis are. But if they move on to other countries, it will be quite difficult to not only track the movements, but actually extradite them back to the UK. So really the race is on for us now to identify where they are and arrest them and bring them back as soon as we can. It could actually take us years if we don't locate them as soon as possible and they move on from Portugal to other countries where we don't have those extradition rights.
Getting a European arrest warrant causes a huge headache for the team, but Interpol are soon on their tail. They've moved across to Spain. But the team have a stroke of luck. Just 2.5 weeks after the murder, Zamir Raja, the man police believe actually shot Aya Hashem, reappears on their radar.
Through inquiries with law enforcement abroad, we know that he hired a Portuguese hire car. He's travelled back to the UK in that vehicle. He came back into the country on his own accord.
So back in the UK, could he get access to a firearm again? Could he try and go after Pasha Khan? Could he go after other witnesses? We had some real concerns that he would be there. So again, it was important once he's back in the UK that we arrest him, and we arrest him on our terms.
At the point of identifying that Zamir Raja was back in the country, we know he's in London. We've enlisted the help of the Metropolitan Police.
Met police officers covertly track Raja's movements before finding the ideal place to strike. Euston Station.
Stay where you are, yeah? Keep your hands out, alright? I've got a taser, okay? Stay where you are. No.
So we have been able to see the arrest and the final moments of Zamir Raja being placed in handcuffs.
Hands behind your back, mate. Hands behind your back. What was that?
Took murder or murder.
Murder.
To actually get the gunman, to actually get the man that's pulled the trigger is very satisfying.
Hey, mind your head. Not now. We'll be across you soon.
To get Raja arrested was great, a real relief.
But Anthony Ennis is still at large in Spain.
Trying to keep track of him in Spain, if he'd have disappeared from there. You're also very much reliant on Interpol and the Spanish police to track him down and arrest him. But to be fair, to the Spanish police, they're exceptional on this case, and within 24 hours of the arrest warrant going live, they had him in custody for us.
Anthony Ennis, the driver of the Toyota Avensis, is finally behind bars. But if their evidence isn't strong enough, he could be let go almost as soon as he's arrested.
When he's brought back to the UK and comes into a police station, we have to charge him and put him before the court straight away, so we don't get the opportunity to interview him. We have to be in a position where the case is match fit and ready to go to court.
On the 17th of May 2021, exactly 1 year after Aya Hashem was murdered, Suleiman, Raja and Ennis stand trial. All are charged with murder.
I attended the court, I saw them. I cried a lot, I can't breathe. But I didn't scream, I didn't say any wrong word, because I felt like, I need to respect the people, the judge, the people, the barristers.
It was a very long trial. Roger put a guilty plea in to manslaughter, and that really was the first time that he admitted to being the shooter, albeit he denied having an intention to murder.
Raja maintained he had only intended to scare Pasha Khan, not kill him. Feroz Suleiman denied involvement.
Suleiman tried to deflect any culpability. He showed no remorse in court. He didn't admit to anything. And even though the weight of evidence was against Feroz Suleiman, he still would not admit or show any remorse during any point of the court case.
What kind of vile beings are you? They were laughing in court. The families were laughing with them. What type of people are you? How can you be so disrespectful, so vile? How can you be so materialistic, fighting just because of money? And you've already got enough. You're already doing well in life. Why do all this?
When they set out to commit that murder, none of them thought about the risk of what they were doing. They were all happy to try and shoot and murder Pasha Khan. Anybody who's prepared to discuss and plan a murder. And then for Samir Raja, his son did it, for any sum of money, but for £1,500 to travel from Manchester to shoot somebody dead.
The jury decided Feroz Suleiman had masterminded the operation and was guilty of murder. He received 34 years. They also agreed Samir Raja and Anthony Ennis had intended to kill Pasha Khan after accepting a £1,500 fee. They received a minimum sentence of 34 and 33 years for murdering Aya Hashim.
Some people would say she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I completely disagree with that. She was doing what she should have been doing and what she should be able to do. They were in the wrong. She was completely innocent.
In total, 120 mobile phones were seized and 88,000 hours of CCTV footage were trawled through in the investigation. It led not just to the convictions of Suleiman, Raja and Ennis, but a further 4 men were found guilty of murder for their part in the conspiracy. From the man who purchased the Avensis to use in the drive-by shooting, to the man who jump-started the engine to facilitate the murder. Judith Chapman, the driver of the blue Ford Fiesta, was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years. Aya Hashim's killers will serve a minimum of 231 years between them.
No sentence can make up for the loss of Aya's life. Most of them will spend most of their life there. My personal view is that in a case like this, certainly Raja, Feroz and Ennis should never come out.
It's the most devastating part of cases like this. There's always a bereaved family, and no matter what you say or you do, you're never going to take that pain away.
Once we finally heard what the sentences are, I'm not gonna lie, there was some sense of relief when you heard that this person's gonna be jailed for 34 years. And they're already in their late 20s and 30s. So we say hopefully they're not gonna get out before they're old or dead. So that in a sense did bring us some relief.
She really an angel. She'd take care of me, of her dad, brothers, and her sister. Because of our situation, she was the one who stand beside me to help me, to support me. And now I lost her. There is no life. I'm not living. I'm not alive anymore. I'm like only a body without soul. It's very hard to see like young ladies in her age, some of them, they get married. They are walking. They start their own lives. But she's not here.
morning of January the 5th, 2010, a woman is reported missing after failing to show up for work.
She was reported missing by a friend of hers who she worked with at the JCPenney store.
Police called out to the woman's home and discovered signs of suspicious activity.
Once we went in and really took a look at things, something occurred in that apartment.
Someone had obviously made some efforts to clean. On all four walls was blood spatter.
Police identify the woman as 35-year-old Sherry Harlan, a retail worker with a troubled past.
She was doing her best to get some help. Sometimes we don't always make the best decisions.
Days later, human remains are discovered in a burnt-out car nearby.
Inside the vehicle was what appeared to be a burned human skull in the driver's seat.
We ran the vehicle, it came back to Sherry. We had a pretty good idea that the skull inside of the car was going to belong to her.
Detectives begin to discover that there are two men in Sherry's life, and that her death appears to be at the center of a love triangle turned tragedy.
Sherry responded something to the effect of being with two men at the same time. It's going to make your stomach upset, LOL.
This is a story of jealousy and how uncontrollable rage can lead to deadly consequences. Everett, Washington State, is a vibrant city, located about 25 miles north of Seattle. It is the largest city in Snohomish County, and unfortunately has its struggles with crime.
Everett's about 120,000 people. It's a port city on the Puget Sound. I would characterize it as a kind of a blue-collar city that is very near the mountains, and you can see them on either the Olympic Peninsula or the Cascade Range to the east.
From 2002 to 2000 and just beginning of 2015, we averaged about, I want to say, 4 or 5 murders a year. We had a lot more call-outs than that, but they were serious assaults and things like that, because we handled all kinds of, assault cases where not everyone was killed. We handled those cases too. But murders, it could average up to 12 some years, but during that span of time, it really varied.
Everett is home to 35-year-old Sherry Harlan. On the morning of the 5th of January 2010, colleagues become concerned when she does not show up for work.
She was reported missing by a friend of hers who she worked with at the JCPenney store at the mall. And friends of hers, when they realized they hadn't seen her in a few days, went to her apartment house, and there was a neighbor or landlady, and both Sherry and her dog Roscoe were missing.
Investigators begin looking into the life of Sherry Harlan. They learn she is a member of the pagan Wicca religion and regularly spends time at the local church.
Wicca is the worship of nature, the balance. We see nature as sacred. We believe that the world is a reflection of deity and that the whole earth is goddess. Sherry had a very complicated past, and I understand that she was doing her best to get some help. Sometimes we don't always make the best decisions.
After search efforts to locate Sherry Harlan yield no results, police obtain a warrant to enter her home.
Once we went in and really took a look at things, it definitely, something occurred in that apartment that led me to believe something serious had happened to Sherry, or that she was a homicide victim.
When law enforcement initially entered Sherry's apartment, they noticed a kind of an overwhelming smell of bleach. Someone had obviously made some efforts to clean portions of the apartment. Linoleum had been removed from various portions of the apartment. In the bedroom itself, on all four walls was blood spatter.
There was some carpet that had been cut up. There was a t-shirt with a partial shoe print on the t-shirt.
There was a futon-type mattress that had several what appeared to be knife cuts in it. There was a glove that had what appeared to be human tissue on it. Everything about this scene was telling law enforcement that violence had occurred there, that someone had been copiously bleeding, and that somebody took some effort to clean it up. The detectives, because of the nature of the scene inside the apartment, contacted the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab, a crime scene investigation team. Law enforcement talked to several individuals who had indicated they'd heard an argument on January 2nd, so Saturday morning, between a male and a female. One of the things that they wanted to find out was anything they could about Sherry Harlan. They contacted the manager of the apartment complex and found out that a man by the name of Dan Young had paid both the first and the last month rent for the apartment, had co-signed on the lease for the apartment. Law enforcement contacted some of Sherry's friends and inquired, who is this Dan Young guy?
In the months prior to her disappearance, Sherry had entered a romantic relationship with Dan Young, an older man who financially assisted her and helped her move out of her previous apartment.
He was more settled. He had some money. He helped Sherry put a down payment on the apartment and move in, and helped her get a computer, and was helping her, get some tools together that she could get to kind of go on with her life.
Well, Mr. Young was never really on our radar as a person of interest. He was clearly somebody that we wanted to talk to, particularly once we kind of found out about the nature of his relationship with Sherry. He gave up his phone and allowed law enforcement to look at his phone, and they were able to document a series of text messages between Sherry and Mr. Young the morning of January 2nd. That Saturday morning she went missing. He was clearly going to be a person that had information that law enforcement wanted, because he would put what occurred to Sherry in context.
Sherry was in her 30s. She was, very likable. She had good friends. She and her friend from the store where they worked, they'd get together on weekends and drink coffee on the porch and share romance novels. And, people really liked her. She'd had a bit of a troubled life and was on again, off again with her boyfriend, Eric Christensen.
On January 2nd, 2010, neighbors reported hearing a horrible, violent fight inside the apartment. They could hear arguing. It was known that Mr. Christensen was a violent person and a jealous person, and so the reason inference is that they were fighting in there and he was mad at her about something.
She was close to a number of different people, but she had atrocious luck in picking men.
Yeah, her friends did not like him. He was jealous, he was super controlling, and they all told her not to do it.
Detectives begin looking into the background of Sherry's on-again, off-again boyfriend, Eric Christensen. Suspicions are soon to arise as they start to find worrying reports of his criminal history. On the morning of January the 5th, police are notified of the disappearance of 35-year-old Sherry Harlan. They obtain a warrant to enter her home and discover signs of a possible homicide. Blood splatter on the walls, pieces of human tissue, and the linoleum floor has been removed. Detectives look into the background of Harlan and discover she had a tumultuous relationship with a man named Eric Christensen.
So I had the information from her coworker that she was living with a man out in Bolbar by the name of Eric Christensen.
I knew of Eric Christensen, and I knew that he had been released from prison and that he was coming to the church and that he had a very intense and controlling personality.
Once law enforcement enforcement got the name of Eric Christensen as a person really of interest in this probable homicide, they checked out to see if he had any criminal history. And Mr. Christensen had quite a bit. He was from Oregon also. From Oregon, he had a statutory rape charge or conviction. He had a forgery conviction. And then from the mid-90s, he had 2 counts of assault in the first degree that had occurred when he had attempted to shoot an ex-girlfriend and her new boyfriend with a rifle.
He took a rifle to a bus stop where he knew his girlfriend was going to be and attempted to kill her. If that is a warning flag, I don't know what is. So he served time for that.
When Eric found out and he got out of jail and he went back home, he found out that she was gone. One of the residents of the house, he lived in the backyard of a property. And one of the residents of the house, who was his friend, he had asked, where did Sherry go? And that's how he found out where she was living. When he found out about it, he found out where she lived, and he started showing up at her place. And at one point, Sherry went out to her vehicle to go to work, and this is information coming from her friends that we're talking to. He had done something to her vehicle so it wouldn't start. So he was doing little things to try to get back into her life.
Sherry became more and more distant from those close to her, causing her friends and family to become worried about her relationship with Christensen.
After law enforcement got the information that, Mr. Christensen was somebody they wanted to talk to on January 5, efforts were made to contact him. They knew that he lived in Gold Bar and were making efforts to find him so they could talk to him. They got information that he was at a hospital in the Monroe area, which is a short distance from Gold Bar. So a detective and a uniformed officer went to meet him to see if he'd be willing to talk to them.
Then we had information that they saw her vehicle parked out in the parking lot, and they saw Eric with her dog.
They contacted outside of the medical facility and noticed almost immediately that one of his hands was pretty heavily bandaged. Christensen's explanation for the cut on his hands is that it occurred after he left Sherry's apartment on January 2, and a couple of quote-unquote Mexicans jumped him and attempted to rob him. What was pretty critical about that interview is that Christensen admitted to having an argument with Sherry Harden on the morning of January 2nd.
And basically, he admitted to being over at Sherry's house that weekend. So that Saturday night, that argument that was heard by the neighbor was a valid argument. He admitted to being there.
He did not deny that they had an altercation. He even claimed to have lost a fingernail in the fight.
So Christensen, while he was talking to Detective Betts, had indicated that when he had gotten out of jail on, I think it was the 14th of December, and found out Sherry had moved out of the place that he and she had shared, he had confronted her about her relationship with Dan Young. Christensen told Betts that both he and Sherry were committed Wiccans, and that he had eventually talked her into coming back into the relationship with him, and then engaging what he termed a blood oath, where she would promise not to have any further contact with Dan Young.
When we talked with Eric about it, when the detectives talked to Eric, he talked about being involved with that church and how this blood oath thing that he did with Sherry, after he found out she moved out and he got back together with her, they did the blood oath, and that was supposed to mean that she was never going to leave him again.
What she had to do was she had to confess what she was doing 3 times.
Okay.
And she had to prick her own blood, prick her finger. She couldn't actually do it, so I had to do it.
She couldn't do it for her?
Yeah, and so she put 3 drops of her own blood in this.
In this mixture?
Yes, and mix it all up, and it's got burned.
Okay.
Now,
so what does that signify when you do that?
That signifies that you're totally willing to do this. You're giving your own life essence to do this.
All right. So what was the sin that she confessed?
That there would be no more sugar daddy whatsoever.
Okay. So she had to say that 3 times?
Yes.
Okay.
After we spoke to Eric all the information we got from him, that's when we did another search warrant to search his house, his shack out in Gold Bar. And when we went out there and searched that, we had more evidence to indicate that he was involved in this murder.
At the time he was arrested, he made comments about making her sign an oath to not see this other man that had been in and out of her life, suggesting that he was attempting to control her in whatever way possible.
Once law enforcement got into the home, they found a number of items. They found a pair of tennis shoes that had apparent blood on them. What was interesting about these shoes is the sole of those shoes had the same kind of markings on it that the bloody shoe print that was found in Sherry Harlan's apartment had. There were several rings that were found inside of Christensen's car. Both of the rings had blood on the interior of the bands. So when law enforcement served their search warrant on Christensen's, both his home and his vehicle, they located what they termed a shopping list. And this shopping list had items on it like bleach, garbage bags, mop, gloves. They were also able to find receipts from various stores indicating the purchase of those types of items on January 4th and 5th. So at approximately 2 p.m. on January 7th, 2010, citizens found a burned out vehicle in a gravel pit off of Reeder Road, which is in East Snohomish County. Law enforcement was contacted and went to the vehicle and found essentially a burned out Hulk. What they discovered inside the vehicle, however, was what appeared to be a burned human skull in the driver's seat.
We ran the vehicle, it came back to Sherry. We had a pretty good idea that the skull inside of the car was going to belong to her. We also found some knives in the car, and in the trunk. There was a block of knives in the trunk, and a single knife up in the front compartment of the vehicle, and one of the knives had a broken knife tip.
In addition to the skull and a knife on the front seat of the front driver's seat of the vehicle, they discovered in the trunk of the car what appeared to be a stack of linoleum that appeared to be a match for the linoleum that had been removed from Sherry's apartment. Ultimately, the medical examiner came out and collected the skull. It was the only body part that was located inside the vehicle, and took that back to the medical examiner's office. Once the medical examiner's office, it was examined, it was photographed, and it was x-rayed. During the x-rays, they were able to determine there was a tip of a knife that had been broken off in the skull, and ultimately that knife tip matched a knife that had been located in the vehicle by the police when they were searching it. A positive identification of the skull belonging to Sherry didn't occur until a forensic odontologist took a look at the skull and was able to compare the teeth in the skull to dental records that had been recovered from Sherry's dentist.
This is definitely not an ordinary occurrence. This was a very unusual crime investigation at that point in time. The decapitated head found in a burned out car that's been mutilated by stabbing it with a knife. The police knew that this was a very unusual case in terms of my career. I would say that it's the most gruesome homicide I ever worked on. And it's one of the most significant cases I ever worked on when I was a prosecutor.
On January the 7th, 2010, Eric Christensen is arrested for the murder of Sherry Harlan. Detectives in Everett, Washington State, are investigating the murder of 35-year-old Sherry Harlan. Her remains were discovered on January the 7th, 2010, when her skull was found inside her burnt-out vehicle, 2 days after she was reported missing. Police have charged her jealous and controlling boyfriend, Eric Christensen, with her murder. Then, on January the 9th, investigators receive a surprising phone call.
On January 9th, law enforcement got a call from a young man by the name of Ryan Gesme, and he said he had information about the homicide of Sherry Harlan. I got a call from detectives. I went up to the Major Crimes Unit and Will and I had a pretty brief initial meeting with Mr. Gesme.
Ryan seemed like a very nice guy. He had met Sherry and Eric through the church and had befriended them. But he was also at the same time a very easily intimidated, kind of very gullible kind of person. And he explained that he had gotten a call from Eric the weekend prior, which would have been the weekend that all this happened, where the fight was heard. He got a call from Eric, who had run out of gas apparently, and he needed Ryan to meet him at a park and ride to come out to help him. So Ryan gets there and he notices that Christensen's not in his vehicle, he's in Sherry's vehicle. And he notices that in the back of the car, he sees rolled up rolls of vinyl and pieces of carpet. And he tells us that Eric told him he needed his help, that he needed to get rid of some garbage in the back of the car. And Eric had Ryan drive him to several different locations up off of Reeder Road. It's a 2-lane road kind of in East County where it's very treed and a lot of blackberry bushes and a lot of hiding places. So he had Ryan drive him to multiple locations where he'd have him arbitrarily just stop. Eric would get out, grab a bag, and toss it into the woods.
Ryan Gesme comes to the police station to do an official interview.
What happened when you got there?
I pulled in and parked where the wood chips were.
Okay. And what did Mr. Christensen do?
He went to the trunk and got out a bag.
What kind of bag?
A garbage bag.
Did you know what was in it at that time?
Not at the time, but he told me it was part of her torso. Afterwards.
Okay, after he already got out of the car and...
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what did you see him do? He took the bag out?
He took the bag out. He grabbed a shovel out of the trunk.
Okay.
And then he walked up into the woods.
I would imagine it'd be really difficult to be asked or told that you need to drive somebody around so that they can dispose of body parts of a human being that they've killed and dismembered, and then that person is sitting in the passenger seat directing you where to go, talking about their day, going on like everything is okay. That has to be a pretty disconnected experience.
He had helped Christensen dispose of Sherry's body and body parts, and he wanted to give that information to law enforcement. And after we got just that very little bit of information from him at the initial meeting, it was really apparent that Ryan had some criminal exposure. So we got him hooked up with a lawyer, somebody that would look out for his interest, and ultimately had Ryan give us what we call a proffer 2 days later on January 11th. A proffer is a statement that a potential witness can give law enforcement that we're not able to use against him in a trial.
Ryan takes investigators to the various dumping sites.
We did take Ryan out onto Reeder Road and about the approximate location of where her body was thrown, and we did recover, most of the portions of her body we recovered.
Ryan Gesme reported to the police that Christensen had reached out to him for help in disposing of the body, and that the body had been carved up into 8 independent pieces.
Once Ryan Gesme led law enforcement to the various locations where the body parts had been discarded, law enforcement went to each of those scenes and attempted to make efforts to locate them. In some of the locations, it was relatively easy to find the body parts because they were just laying on top of the forest floor. Several of the body parts, however, had been buried, and the detectives and the uniformed deputies were unable, at least initially, to find them.
Ryan would do anything for you. He'd give you the shirt off his back. And I think Eric knew that. And he also threatened Ryan's family if Ryan told anybody. Well, what I do know is that one of his family members was driving down the road and saw him sitting against the car and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he said, "Go home." go home. And so they left, but they knew something was up. And so they pushed it and they didn't let it go. And that's when he broke down and said that this is what had happened, and he was very right to go to the police. He was very confused and scared.
Christensen had made a number of statements that he had quote-unquote done it and had quote-unquote killed her. He then asked Gesme to help him over the course of the next couple of days, help him discard the various body parts. Ryan described to law enforcement how the various parts of Sherry's disarticulated body had been placed in plastic garbage bags, and those garbage bags had been placed into the trunk of her car. And then over the course of the 4th and 5th, they had dumped those body parts off of Reeder Road in East Snohomish County. Ryan had a pretty good memory of where it was that the various body parts had been discarded by Eric. And he had described for law enforcement that as they were driving up Reeder Road, Ryan was driving, Christensen was in the front passenger seat, and Christensen would just on occasion tell Ryan to stop. The vehicle would stop, Christensen would get out of the vehicle, go to the trunk, grab a garbage bag containing a body part, grab a shovel, and then wander off into the woods. The medical examiner did discover 3 stab wounds in Sherry's torso, and also the stab wound in her head that left the knife tip embedded in her skull.
Once we built the case and once we had the information that we did, we charged him for murder.
The morning of January 2nd, Sherry had been complaining of an upset stomach, and Christensen had gone across the street to Walmart to buy her some medicine for her stomach. While Christensen was out of the apartment, Sherry and Dan Young had been texting back and forth, and Sherry had complained of the upset stomach that she had. In response to that complaint of her upset stomach, Young had responded something to the effect of being with 2 men at the same time, it's going to make your stomach upset, LOL. Based upon interviews with Christensen and how he reacted to law enforcement and what some of the witnesses overheard later that morning, law enforcement inferred that Mr. Christensen had read those text messages while Sherry was in the shower, confronted her when she got out of the shower, and then subsequently killed her based upon the information that she had violated an earlier promise to him not to see Mr. Young anymore.
It was a violation of the blood oath that they had taken. It was probably humiliating to Eric Christensen to be cheated on. He flew into a jealous rage and decided in that moment that he was going to kill her.
He was so jealous. He basically had told her when they took that oath that it was them two and them two only. And she wasn't supposed to be talking to Dan Young anymore. And when he saw that, that's when he got angry enough and killed her.
In a case like this, particularly as graphic as the various crime scenes were, particularly the kind of the horrific manner in which Christensen had disarticulated the body, we want to make sure that we are able to tell our story, what happened to Sherry, how we know that happened, and how that indicates that the murder was premeditated.
May the 25th, 2010, Everett, Washington State. Eric Christensen is brought to trial, charged with the first-degree murder of retail worker Sherry Harlan. After 5 months of building a case against Christensen, prosecutors must now wait to see what the courts decide.
See, we never knew what his defense was going to be. We charged him with first-degree murder. We never knew what his defense to the case was going to be until we actually got into that courtroom.
We really needed to make a conscious decision about how we were going to present that evidence to the jury. We want to make sure that we are not just horrifying the jury by just throwing up, photographs of decapitated corpses, skulls, and body parts. So it was a fine line that we had to walk. The tack that I took was that ultimately this is a very, very simple case, and it's a case about a very jealous and controlling man that killed his girlfriend when she stepped out of line.
His defense was that it was first-degree murder, it was second-degree murder. That's when we found out that Eric admitted that he had done this. But his defense was that he should not be charged with the first-degree murder. It should be a second-degree murder.
At various times throughout the trial, I would look at Christensen to see how he's reacting to various testimony. For the most part, Christensen was, somewhat stone-faced and somewhat stoic throughout.
Throughout the trial, Christensen never denies killing Sherry, though his defense argues that there was no premeditation to the murder.
They argued throughout their case, both in opening and through the questions that they asked during the evidentiary portion of the trial, and then in closing, was that Christensen had in fact killed Sherry Harlan, but it had been done in a jealous rage, and that it had not been premeditated, but that it had been intentional.
Ryan Gesme was next to testify, a reluctant accomplice to the horrific disposal of Sherry's body. Gesme was given special immunity due to the information he was able to provide to the authorities throughout the investigation.
Gesme was an interesting witness because we were able to corroborate his initial story to law enforcement that he'd helped dispose of the body parts, because law enforcement was able to find the body parts that Gesme said he had helped Christensen dispose of. He's also a witness, however, that we have given immunity to. We have told him and his lawyer that if he testifies truthfully, that we are not going to charge him with any crime for what it was that he did helping Christensen get rid of the body parts. The jury in this particular case took just over 3 hours to convict Eric Christensen of murder in the first degree.
It seems horribly out of sync, but Eric Christensen only received a sentence of 37 and a half years.
I remember specifically during the trial, Eric would stare at people. He would try to make eye contact with the witnesses, and he would just stare at you. And then as the trial progressed and the jury went out and came back, he was laughing about it. I mean, he was smirking and, really didn't care.
The blood oath is it's okay. Take your time. The blood oath is basically you make an oath between the gods and the goddesses. Okay. In the Wicca religion. And from my understanding is if you break it, it's the ultimate price. Which is what happened.
Okay, what do you mean by the ultimate price? What is the death? Okay.
During the oath, Sherry essentially promised or gave her oath that she wasn't going to have any further contact with Dan Young, and then pricked her finger and then dropped some blood into a flame from a candle. According to Mr. Christensen, in ancient times, if someone broke an oath of that nature, they would often be killed.
Blood oaths are not part of the Wiccan tradition. Blood oaths are, I think they're more movie sensationalized. That I've never really had anybody in real life want to take one.
The Wiccans that law enforcement contacted were almost unanimous in indicating that the blood oath had really nothing to do with their church, and that Eric, Christensen was kind of out on his own, wanting to form his own group with a belief system that was less Wiccan and perhaps a little darker than what he was getting from the Wiccan community.
This was truly a person who didn't represent our faith and was using our faith to try to get out of or make excuses for his behavior.
By him making her agree to this blood oath thing, I think he already knew in his mind if she didn't do what he told her to do, she was going to die.
If we didn't secure a conviction, he would be out on the streets and would very likely kill one of his future girlfriends.
So we know about Eric Christensen is that when he becomes jealous, when he thinks a woman has wronged him, he will either kill them or attempt to kill them. I'm not sure that that individual is ever going to be rehabilitated. And at this stage in the game, to make sure we separate him for as long as we can from society and in particular women, so he doesn't get involved with anyone else and potentially have them do something that he doesn't like.
When I had heard that Eric was last seen with the dog and the dog was alive, and we knew that he had been out in Gold Bar, he lived out there, and we contacted him out in East County. I did everything I could. I believe I did put out some flyers and a press release looking for the dog, asking the public for help finding the dog, but unfortunately we never did find him. I think Eric killed him. That's my feeling.
The dog was seen in her car tied up at one point in time, and presumably with Christensen. He did make a cryptic remark about the dog, which was something to the effect of, she doesn't need her dog anymore. And that was not fully understood at the time, but what he was saying was she doesn't need her dog anymore because she's dead.
Sadly, Sherry's dog, Roscoe, has never been found. Once the trial has concluded, Sherry's family, friends, and many members of the Wiccan Church gather to remember her.
We would have gathered and cast sacred space, and then usually sing a song, invoke her spirit, tell her how much we cared about her, and then tell stories about when she did this, when she did that, things like that, and laugh and celebrate and remember her in a positive way as much as possible.
Everyone that I spoke to about Sherry talked about her being kind of a friendly person that made friends easily, that had an infectious laugh.
Do I believe her family has a sense of closure? I know that there are friends in her life that do not have a sense of closure. So I would not think so. I've not spoke to her family. I don't know that you'll ever get over something that happens like that. I don't have closure.
I don't know that family and friends ever get over something like that, because the method in which somebody dies matters. I think it matters with what kind of nightmares you have later and how you live with it for the rest of your life. And I think this was so gruesome that it's probably hard to erase. Maybe there's some way to erase that, but again, learning to live with what happened is the real challenge.
That's something they just have to live with the rest of their lives, the loss of their family member. I don't think they look at it as being closure. I think that they look at it as the person responsible was held accountable, and therefore I can go on, but it's never going to be the same.